and pledge to the Pledge of Allegiance.
I would like to give the opportunity for everybody in here to take a moment of silence, remembering that this is a very important week in our Congress with the potential shutdown of the United States government in the very near future and potential impact on 800,000 of our friends, neighbors, and constituents. I know that our government in the federal level is at what I would consider sort of a crisis. We can't seem to get along. So I would like to do a moment of silence. Let's think about this and say our own little personal prayers to see what we can't do to fix this. And amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, here she is. Well, council members and citizens, I have the high honor of honoring Reverend Alma Dungy to be with us tonight. She's one of Charleston's most active and dedicated citizens. We're proud to both thank her and honor her for her tireless service to the community tonight. She's right here to my right, and I'm going to read a proclamation, Reverend Dungy, our dear friend, in your honor, if any of your family would like to join us. And I'd also like to ask Councilmember Lewis and Gregory to please join me at the, and Mitchell, to join me. I think technically Reverend Dungy lives in Councilmember Lewis's district, but her spirit and her gracious activities to benefit the city of Charleston cross all jurisdictional boundaries. So if I may, a proclamation to share with you tonight.
So she can be in the front.
Oh, there we go. Whereas the city of Charleston wishes to recognize Reverend Alma Dungy, who is known for her lifelong work as a community activist and leader, and whereas Reverend Dungy is a native Charlestonian who attended Burke High School and the Baptist College, where she was among the first African Americans to attend. For over 40 years, Reverend Dungy worked as a nurse at Roper Hospital, McLennan Banks Hospital, St. Francis, and MUSC. And whereas as president of the North Central neighborhood, Reverend Dungy worked tirelessly to maintain its historic character, ensure safety, and advocate for businesses and homeowners. And whereas as a committed environmentalist, Reverend Dungy has served with Keep Charleston Beautiful and Clean City Sweep. And Reverend Dungy was the first recipient of the City of Charleston Harold Kuhn Award in 1999 for her community and neighborhood leadership, exemplified through her work with organizations like Charleston Promise, AmeriCorps, Vista, Eastside's Clean Sweep, the Concerned Citizens of the Low Country, the Community Advisory Panel for Albright and Wilson, the Humanities Foundation, YWCA, Neighborhood Service Commission. You're starting to get how active this lady has been in our community. Charleston County Schools, Crisis Ministry, and whereas Reverend Dungy has served for 22 years on the Redevelopment and Preservation Commission of the City of Charleston, and for 45 years, Reverend Dungy served with the March of Dimes and organized local Walk America events to raise funds and awareness. And whereas Reverend Dungy has also been a business owner, national TV minister, and both assistant pastor and pastor at Ebenezer AME Church, Shiloh AME Church, and New Israel. And whereas I congratulate Reverend Dungy on her numerous achievements and thank her for many contributions to the City of Charleston, now therefore I, John J. Tecklenburg, Mayor of the City of Charleston, do hereby proclaim today, Tuesday, February 12th, as Reverend Alma Dungy Day in the City of Charleston. And now, Reverend Dungy, in your honor, upon the recommendation of your council member, James Lewis, and the consideration of the city's recreation department, Councilmember Lewis has an announcement he would like to make.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to my colleagues. We're in the process of renovating 1089 King Street, which we have neighborhood council meetings at. I've been on city council for 24 years. Reverend Dungy has been the only neighborhood president I served under until about a year ago. She's been there over 30-something years as neighborhood president. We have some money in the line item in the budget to redo that center, and we're going to name it thanks to the members of City Council, the Recreation Commission, chaired by Councilman Gregory. We're going to name that building the Reverend Alma Dungy Community Center. Thank you.
Let's go down and get a picture. Y'all indulge us.
I would like to thank each and every one of you for being here today, and for our mayor, who really worked hard. And I just thank God for all of you. Continue to work. I was sorry that I couldn't make it earlier because of my condition now. See, I was walking all the time, greeting and helping people. And it's a blessing when you can be a blessing to somebody else. Because that's what life is about, sharing and caring. If you help somebody, as you pass along, your love won't be in vain. And I just thank God for each and every one of you. I pray His blessing upon you all, that you continue doing the work. Everybody not going to say good things, even when you're doing good things, but that's all right if they say something mean. You don't have to respond in that manner. God said, put him in His hand. Or Jesus says He will repeat. Or we have to trust in God and do good. And that's why you're all here right now doing good. God continue to bless you and keep you. Amen.
Thank you. And next we have another short recognition of just a fine young man in our community. And I just came to meet him at our recent professional breakfast of the Martin Luther King Day celebration, and his name is Kevon Singleton. He's a senior at the First Baptist School, and he was the youth speaker at the breakfast this year. He's the son of Michael and Santonia Singleton. He's created 5 documentaries already on the civil rights movement, received multiple awards in filmmaking, co-produced a film titled Atlanta, the City Too Busy to Help. At First Baptist School, he studies English and political science. I think he'd like to run for mayor one day, but you have to move to the city of Charleston. He plays offensive tackle for the varsity football team. He's quoted as saying, "My goal is to work as hard as I can and be the best I can be. Effort is everything. I am a great student who enjoys learning new things. I'm fast off the ball and will never give up." Kevon, would you come forward and just share a few words with the council?
Thank you. Thank you so much for this opportunity today. I really wasn't expecting to say anything, but recently I was given the opportunity to speak on Friday, this past Friday, at the Charleston GOP Black History program. And along with my speaking engagements has become new connections. The whole purpose of a community is, in fact, to learn different things about each other and to join together, whether it is the difference between races economically or, in fact, just political parties. You know, we are all one. The city of Charleston has come together before to be one, and we all can agree that right now our United States government is in a bit of controversy. So why not let the United States learn from us, that we can show them that the city of Charleston is the stepping stone. We are the model of excellence in the United States. Thank you.
God bless you. Thank you. Thank you. Keep up the good work. Next, we have no public hearing matters this evening, so we go to our approval of city council meetings minutes. We have a motion to approve both January 8th and 22nd. Griffin and Jackson, any additions, deletions, changes? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Next is our citizens' participation period. We have 20 people signed up, so I'll ask you to keep your remarks to 90 seconds, a minute and a half, and Madam Clerk will call out like 4 or 5 individuals at a time. If y'all would queue up on either side and just step forward, state your name and address, and we'll be happy to hear from you any remarks you would like to make to the council this evening.
Okay, first will be Muhammad Idris.
Lisbon, last name Lisbon? Okay.
Okay. Anthony Bryant, Melinda Hamilton, Maria Keeling Breeze. In that order, please.
Evening, Mayor, City Council. I'm going to read from the 123rd Psalms, and it's the first through the 4th verse. Unto thee lift I up my eyes, O thou dwellest up in the heaven. Behold, as the eyes of servants look unto the hand of their masters, and as the eyes of the maiden unto the hand of her mistress, so our eyes wait upon the Lord our God until he have mercy upon us. Have mercy upon us, Lord. Have mercy upon us, for we are exceedingly full with contempt. Our soul is exceedingly filled with the scorning of those that are of ease, and with the contempt of the proud. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Good evening. I'm Melinda Hamilton, and I'm pleased to be here to speak on behalf of the League of Women Voters. I want to thank City Council and our mayor for your service to this community, and I'm proud to call Charleston home. But I may be even prouder to hear the United Nations Women's Council and women around the world speak about the work that is being done right here in Charleston on behalf of women's rights and human rights. This city is an icon in the Deep South, and because the League works closely with the United Nations, this work is always being held up as an example of change for positive in the South. But I'm here to ask your support for the Equal Rights Amendment. And I have a story to tell you that's just what I think you were asking us to pray for. A bipartisan bill that the League supports, H. 3391, is in the House Judiciary Committee of the South Carolina General Assembly. It's led by Gilda Cobb Hunter, a Democrat from Orangeburg, who is the longest-serving member of the House, and by Charleston's Peter McCoy, a Republican who is chair of the House Judiciary Committee. The League is so proud of the grit, the grace, and the leadership that is represented by this bill, and support from Charleston City Council and ratification ratification of the ERA by the General Assembly would be a major step, and it would allow South Carolina to stand proudly on the right side of history.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
It was good to see Mr. Tecklenburg at the flood commission with Governor McMasters, and he's on the stakeholder board. I was there on flooding, and also the Ray Farmer, who I made public comment in 2013 regarding that issue. And secondly, my library usage, and this is the IRS Bill of Rights right here for the record. And on January 22nd, received from the United States Court of Appeals, Richmond, Virginia, Brian Richards, the U.S. Department of Education. And it's pretty serious to me. It happened on the same day I was here. In 1045, Pope Urban II sanctioned the Crusades. In 1500, the transatlantic slave trade was sanctioned. 281 years later, Thomas Jefferson did notes for the state of Virginia stating that African Americans are equal to white people in the world for 281 years. Shane Massey and Hembry, who's going to be the author of the educational bill, is doing the 8th Amendment, electrocution, and also other forms of cruel and unusual punishment to people on death row. So we hope that many African Americans will be on death row with a horrible education system in this state. I don't know how the facts don't support that. There's no empirical evidence to support what you're talking about. It doesn't support that. That's a lie. Quit lying to people about this state. This state has a serious problem with black
people. Thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members and all of my fellow individuals out in the audience. Madam Clerk, I have to compliment you. Thank you for saying my name correctly. That is a rarity, so thank you.
You're welcome. I can understand. You're right.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I will be very brief and to echo the sentiments of the lovely representative from the League of Women Voters. I'm fortunate enough to be one of the members of the Commission on Women, and wanted to just speak about specifically Gilda Cobb Hunter, who is, yes, Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry. I usually am very loud, so I don't like to get as close to the microphone for that reason. But I can tell you that many years ago, I remember speaking with her on the phone and doing a political science project when I was at Furman. And I can say that there's nobody finer in our state legislature than her to be the one supporting this along with Mr. McCoy. So we strongly urge the council to put their positive message behind this and urge the state legislature to support the ERA. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Next.
Yes, ma'am. Your name, please?
Yes. We call Lisbon. We can figure out the first part. Yes.
Okay. I'm Audrey Lisbon. I'm a resident of the West Side neighborhood community, and I live on Fishburne Street. And I stand before you today because I have a couple of concerns, and one of them is the certain items that are being sold in our corner stores, and these items can be associated with things that are not conducive in the stores that you can buy in novelty shops. And I'm talking about like glass pipes and, the cigarette rolling paper and the Jewel E cigarettes or whatever have you. And I know that they do have a right to sell these things in the stores. However, there are children that frequent these stores all the time after school and spring break's coming up, and it's just doesn't look good, in the community. So I'm hoping that there can be something that can be done to an ordinance or something written up that they don't have to be sold in the stores. They can get it in these novelty shops. The second thing is that our city police department kind of want that connection in our neighborhood. And I'll be brief about this, but then it's a true story. There were times that the policemen, when they patrol the neighborhood, and I get it, they're supposed to protect and serve. But if there can be a closer relationship in our neighborhood and our community, I can't speak for any other community but ours. My grandson was missing, for a while, but then when a police officer saw me crying and upset, well, right away he asked, who I was looking for, and I described him. He said, oh yeah, I know the little boy. He said, I seen him on the bicycle riding around. He said, you'll be all right. Well, anyway, that's the kind of connection that we want in our neighborhood, and hopefully we can get it. Thank you.
Okay. All right, we will have Will Silcox, Leah Farrell, Caroline Bradner, Mark Knapp, and Martha Maynard, or Menard.
If you heard your name called, please step forward to the microphone. Give your name and address, please.
Good evening, Leah Farrell with the Preservation Society. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. Leah Farrell with the Preservation Society of Charleston. Thank you, Council. I just want to speak on the interim stormwater regs this evening. So we understand they didn't hit the mark, we get that, but we really feel that it's important that the hydrologists, the stormwater experts continue to work on this issue. The pushback from the development community is always going to be disguised around affordable housing, but let's not let them co-opt that term. Let's not confuse cheap with affordability. And unfortunately, our community is learning the hard way that we can't afford not to do something. We must endorse sustainable building practices for our residents. We are spending millions on drainage and infrastructure projects throughout our city to correct the errors of our past. And we just need to ask, are we willing to fix our development practices now, or are we going to kick the can down the road for another 20 years? We urge you all to take bold action and do something wonderful for our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Dr. Martha Menard. I live on Folly Road on James Island, and I'm here this evening to urge the council to vote in favor of the resolution supporting the ERA, and I'd like to speak to the economic impact of this. I don't know if you all are aware, but the gender wage gap in South Carolina is larger than the national average. Many people are familiar with the statistic of 80 cents on the dollar. Women in South Carolina, white women make 74 cents on the dollar. African American women make 53 cents on the dollar. The advantages of supporting the ERA would lead to greater economic empowerment for women in South Carolina. It would help to support economic stability for families, and given the meeting that I just sat through on Ways and Means, it would add to the growing tax base in the state. So thank you, and I hope you will support the Equal Rights Amendment.
Thank you. Good point. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Caroline Bradner, address 49 Calhoun Street, and I'm here representing the Coastal Conservation League. We'd like to commend the city staff and particularly the Resilience Department for the hard work that they're doing on flooding mitigation and updating the city's sea level rise strategy and the new resilience page on the City of Charleston's website. Mayor Tecklenburg and members of council, you've made it clear that flooding and mitigation for flooding is a priority for you. And we know that there's so much good work that you guys are all doing already to deal with flooding. We were pleased to see that the #1 goal listed in the updated strategy is to protect citizens and neighborhoods, and that innovative policies are needed to ensure that we are building future neighborhoods resilient to flooding that maintain their value in spite of future challenges. In order to achieve this goal, we'll need more innovative zoning, and we'll need more stringent land use policies, stringent stormwater design standards to protect the quality of life and financial investments of the residents of Charleston. We had to be proactive. Floodplains cover nearly 60% of the landscape of the city of Charleston. We need to stop developing in the floodplain. Now is the time to apply science and policies that can accommodate the growth we know is coming without exacerbating flooding. A no-fill ordinance within the city would be a great place to start, not manipulating the natural services that were provided by things like drainage basins. The updated sea level rise strategy is an excellent resource for planning a more resilient future, and we're hopeful that all of this discussion and planning will lead to important and impactful decisions in 2019. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Anybody else? Okay. Next, this is a little bit of a challenge. B, a Kobe or Kobe. The next one I know, Jane Seekings, Franny Henty, and Stigfried. Is it Siegfried? Okay.
If you heard your name and would like to speak, please come forward.
Hello, I'm Ann Siegfried. I live downtown and I'm on the Commission on Women, and I don't have too much to say, but I just want to amplify what's already been said, that I hope the city will adopt and support the passage of the ERA. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Franny Henty, 615 Flint Street, James Island. I hope to see the stormwater restrictions implemented as soon as possible. I have a vested interest not only as a property owner, but as a realtor. I have a fiduciary responsibility to my clients to sell in an area where the government takes care of the land and allows safe permitting. I have a particular concern with a specific neighborhood. At a TRC meeting January 17th, developers stated that they tried to work with the neighbors, but this was not my experience, and we're right next door. We're the adjacent property. We've tried to reach out to the developer, but to no avail. They haven't worked with it. I have it on good authority that an L-shaped pipe in the design is not a good idea. The developer will not speak to me to be able to overcome my objections. This is even after his engineer offered to speak with me. The development proposes 3 drainage ponds collecting 55+ acres in stormwater runoff with no plan for filtration or hazardous waste removal, when we already have seen oil in the ditches, and I have experienced property management that tells me this is not a good idea. The drainage before and after the development have proven faulty, and my private engineer stated that it desperately needs to be addressed. The WAMBA studies will address such needs to happen so our engineers can know what to ask for from the development. They can't know what the mark is until they have this, and the mark cannot be missed. The developers' homes are a small fraction of our overall community. It's a small sacrifice for the developer to hold off until the 1,000 of us who could be affected by a land disturbance from this development. As far as money, in my travels where I've been, the UK, New Jersey, Florida, Orange County, California, Delaware, Chesapeake, Manhattan, those are all places that have tolls, and I've never heard y'all talk about tolls. But
thank you.
Mark, you missed your turn. Come on.
We wouldn't want to miss your turn.
Anyway, so everyone, at least my wife says that. Mark Knapp, I told you so, what, 20 years ago, if those of you that can remember. You know, the stormwater thing keeps biting you in the rear. Now, a couple things I noticed. Number one, you guys keep doing studies, and I'm with Councilman White. You're wasting your money. These engineers are just soaking you for this stuff. It's simple solutions. That's what the Dutch do. It's all simple. They're soaking you left and right with these studies. If you don't have people inside in your staff that can do these things. You need to fire people and get people that can. They're not that hard. And then again, I see another $700,000 contract go to over $8 million. I want to sign up for this program. I mean, one change order and you add $8 million to it. I would jump on that. But I don't know why you allow this. I don't know why somebody isn't investigating this. Maybe it's a weird contract where you do this sort of thing. Let me tell you, the engineers today, very few of them are worth their weight. I'm telling you, I deal with them every day, and it's, you know, they draw it, they're not responsible. And that's their attitude. You really need to start looking for different engineers, people that really want to do the job.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, Nita Weiss, Denise Marie Fugo, Andrea Schick, Deborah Say, and Dixie Sumter, I think that is.
This is for you, for Mayor Ciano.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. I'm Nita Weiss. I'm here with Charleston Sister Cities International. We have two sister city programs. One is with Spoleto, Italy, and the other one is with Panama City, Panama, the gateway to the Panama Canal. I'm here tonight because we've got a busy year ahead of us. The Consulate General from Barbados will be here February 2nd through the 25th. He arrives on a Friday and departs Monday. And I'd like to see if we can ratify our Barbados sister city partnership that we had discussed when they were here in May last year. The other thing is, and so Harry, I'd like to see Councilman Griffin if you and I can connect on that. We need to bring Flor de Orne on board, okay, sometime first quarter. And then secondly, Doha Qatar, who was here last year in February, came to invest or explore investing $45 billion into the economy. Think of that as an option, gentlemen. Then when they got off the plane, they said they wanted to do a sister city with Charleston. I was up to my eyes in alligators last year trying to get a template done for our mission to Panama, which we did in collaboration with the Department of Commerce and which was highly successful. So now I'm able to focus on Doha. They have been working with me closely. And they want to invite us to a delegation to Doha in April. Okay, so we need to sign this, and I need to find somebody on City Council to be the Doha City Council liaison. Also, Michael Moore would like to do one with Sierra Leone, Freetown, Sierra Leone, with the International African American Museum. So I'm going to need a City Council person for that as well. And again, thank you so much. As you know, sister cities add $525 million to the local economy, and we want to give you a good return on your investment ultimately. Thank you for helping us in our startup mode as we work with the city and City Council.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
With liberty and justice for all. Let's say it slowly again. With liberty and justice for all. My name is Denise Fugo. I live in West Ashley, and I'm hoping that City Council will endorse the Equal Rights Amendment. I wanted to add to some statistics. Women start at a disadvantage in terms of wages, from 50 to 80 cents on the dollar compared. But the real tragedy is by age 50, women and people of our color are making 50% of what men are making. I work with Meals on Wheels in the afternoon. I'm a lowly person there, but 69% of our meals are delivered to women that are homebound and very poor. And those are women that have a place to live. It doesn't count the people that are on the street, the women on the street, the women in tents that don't have a place to live. In the United States history, women are the poorest today they have ever been. It's part of the consequences of not having an Equal Rights Amendment. South Carolina, I know we want to be a global leader. I know Charleston wants to be a global leader. Supporting the Equal Rights Amendment would be one way of doing that. Right now, we rank in the top 10 of both senior poverty and senior hunger. And if we can't properly take care of the men and women that have worked for us over the years by giving them equal rights and equal access under the law, then we have failed in being a global leader. So please support the Equal Rights Amendment and make us proud. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name's Andrea Skank, and I live at 26 Mary. And I am here also as a member of the Commission on Women to talk about the ERA. And interestingly, I didn't realize this. The ERA doesn't say anything about women. Its equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the U.S. or any state on account of sex. So it's really not about for women or for men. It's just saying that we should all be equal. Part of my job, my day job, is helping organizations with governance. And as Denise just mentioned, our pledge says liberty and justice for all, yet our laws don't allow for that. So I hope that we can make history. I hope that you will encourage our state legislature to pass the resolution so that we can finally get the ERA passed. And as Mr. Singleton noted, we're a model of excellence, so let's set the standard. Thank you so much.
I know we have a couple more speakers. We generally don't like to have a disruption here in the chamber, so I'm going to ask that if everyone who came here in support of this resolution for the Equal Rights Amendment to please stand and be recognized. Okay.
I was just going to ask everybody to do that too.
Did anyone come to oppose it?
Would you like to speak?
Okay. You can still speak.
All the women that have spoken are a hard act to follow.
There you go.
I think that they have said everything that I would have said and more.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm Deborah Say, and I live on James Island, 15 Paddle Creek Avenue.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Did we miss anyone? Did anybody sign up who hasn't been called or would like to say a word to council this evening? So that's the end of our citizens' participation period. Thank you, everyone, for participating and sharing with us. Next will be, in fact, our report from the Commission on Women. So proud that we have one here in the city of Charleston and represented also by Council Member Jackson on that commission. But we're going to call forth the chairperson of the commission, Janet Robinson. Alderman.
Thank you, Mayor Tecklenburg, and I do want to recognize Councilmember Jackson as the vice chair of our commission. You've heard from several people. I want to give you just a few little points because I think this is really important, and I think it could allow the city of Charleston to make another major leap. Our commission voted unanimously to forward you this resolution showing support for the current bills in the South Carolina legislature. There are currently 2 of them. We also have the support of several other organizations that literally represent thousands of women in the community and around the state. And they are the League of Women Voters, the Center for Women, the Sophia Institute, the Tri-County Women's Project, the YWCA, the American Association of University Women, and the Women's Rights and Empowerment Network. I'd like to ask my fellow commission members if you would stand and come join me up here. We believe that women deserve full and equal rights in the U.S. Constitution. The only right that is guaranteed to women in our Constitution is the right to vote. That's it. We're asking you to support the concept of equal rights as you did a year ago when you adopted the resolution in support of the UN Convention to eliminate discrimination against women. And in that resolution that you adopted unanimously, it stated, whereas the Charleston City Council desires that women and girls who live in the city of Charleston enjoy all the rights, privileges, and remedies that are bestowed on all people in the United States, no matter their race, national origin, gender, or religious belief, and declares that Charleston, South Carolina is a city that shall not tolerate discrimination against women or girls. Adopting the resolution in support of the ERA is your next step in supporting equal rights for the women of this community. Most Americans think the ERA is already in the Constitution, about 90% of them. Unfortunately, with the resurgence of the Me Too movement, which is really highlighting the second-class treatment of many women, the ERA is really needed now more than ever. Former Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia was asked about the ERA and the Constitution, and he said, "Certainly the Constitution does not require discrimination on the basis of sex. The only issue is whether it prohibits it. It doesn't." The ERA would expand legal protections for women, and the biggest impact would be in that area of pay equity. Women and children are the vast majority of persons in poverty in the U.S., and despite laws guaranteeing equal pay for equal work, women on average are making those low salaries that Denise referred to. In South Carolina, if the current trends continue, women will not see pay equity until 2088, 69 years from now. Do the figure of the tax that would come out of those years. I think it's time to recognize that we can do better by our female citizens, and we ask you to unanimously adopt the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. Order in the court. Thank you. So now the matter of the resolution comes to council. Motion made by Councilmember Griffin and seconded by Councilmember Jackson. Any discussion? Councilmember Shade.
For record, Mr. Mayor, that and I'm speaking in my hat as president of the Charleston County Bar Association, that the Bar Association fully endorses the approval of this resolution.
Great. Well, I would also like to just shout out to our representative, Peter McCoy, who's chair of the Judiciary Committee. He'll be a key figure in the passage of this in Columbia. And although he wasn't mentioned, and I'm sure there are many other sponsors, but I know that Representative Leon Stavanakis is also a sponsor, along with Representative Gilda Cobb-Hunter. So our thanks to them, and congratulations, and thanks for their leadership on this issue. Councilmember Ware.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, as the minority sitting on this council, I mean, the law said that we couldn't be here decades ago. When I see, a lot of times when we think about our forefathers, I find it hard to gather, how could you not let your mother have the right to vote? How can you not let your wife not have the right to vote or hold office? So I feel privileged to be able to cast a vote today in favor of this. But what I would also ask is that we go further. All of us have connections around this table. I would hope we would go to county council with this too. Call the elected officials that we know that are allies and ask them, in particular the ones in Columbia, to support this. Who amongst us didn't feel proud when the Confederate flag came off the dome, or when the flag came off the pole? It would be so awesome if the state of South Carolina could be one of the final three that would lead to ratification of this amendment. So I applaud these women for the enthusiasm that they have. But 6 degrees of separation puts us in contact with so many other people. So I would hope that it just doesn't end with this resolution tonight, that we would use the influences and the context that we do have with our legislators in the General Assembly and, of course, the State Senate. So thank you, ladies, for what you've done. Onward and upward.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to be heard? So we now vote to encourage and support the timely passage by the South Carolina Legislature of the Equal Rights Amendment to the United States Constitution, making South Carolina the final state required to ratify the amendment. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you all very much. Madam Clerk, an outburst is not allowed in council chambers, Madam Clerk. Thank you. Congratulations. And thank you for bringing this to City Council. Next, Mark Wilbert, our Chief Resilience Officer, officer will have a short presentation on the adoption of the flooding and sea level rise strategy, second edition.
Second edition, the 2019 edition. Good afternoon, Council. I'd like to go ahead and give you a very short overview of the document that I believe you were given last week and that you're going to be asked to pretty much adopt here. So what's important to know about the 2019 is that it continues and builds from the 2015 strategy. And one of the things that I'm very proud of, and I think our team here in the city is very proud of, is that this document responds to a lot of the citizen feedback that we received over the last 3 years. When we wrote the 2015 document, we said we would do that, and we've done that, and I'll point out a little later how we made sure we did that. Continues our reliance on science and data. We said we would do that, and we've done that. What's new in here is it outlines 5 components, kind of 5 buckets that we, as a city staff, find ourselves doing work to support this strategy. It outlines very extensively our initiatives that all of the city departments are doing, gives examples, talks a little bit about those studies and initiatives and the looking forward, and I am going to spend some time talking about that when we get there. But one of the key issues here is that this document now, as asked for by the citizens, is completely web-enabled. Everything on it is there for people to see. I cannot take credit for that. I've got to give credit to Tracy McKee and Katie McCain, who really have worked almost tirelessly for about 2 weeks to get that up and running. But that is available. All of the information is available to every one of our citizens, and it ties right back to this. And lastly is that this has been a very collaborative document. We've had probably 3 opportunities before the Sustainability and Resilience Committee, as well as we've met with other groups in the city. We've solicited their feedback and made adjustments based on their feedback. Just want to start. I don't want to spend a lot of time with this unless you want to, but we said we were going to stay with the Charleston Harbor. We stay with the Charleston Harbor. Sea level continues to rise in Charleston Harbor. It just does, and it's accelerating. The projections that came out in the 4th climate assessment that just released in 2018 by NOAA show that, and again, using the intermediate graph, that the projections for sea level rise in the next 50 years in Charleston have increased from our 2015 study. Okay? We've upped it by a half a foot because that's what the document shows. That's the same document we used in 2015. We're using it again in 2018. And then here is again our what used to be called nuisance flooding. Under the current administration, we don't call it that anymore. And when I say that's the federal administration, we call it minor coastal flooding. So those are the disruption flooding days, and you can see the bottom, the yellow is actually observed. You can see where that's trending. And what's interesting about that is if you look at it, it's right there on the intermediate scale, which correlates back to the previous 2 graphs that I showed you. So all of this kind of lines up very nice from a science standpoint in the projections that we're having, and it's exactly what we're seeing. The 5 critical components, as we were looking at this over the past 3 years, and we've had a team working on this, we've realized that it's really 5 areas of work that the city has. One is resources. We just had a great discussion about resources and where they're coming from. That's not going to go away. That's going to continue to be there. Land use. I jumped to land use because really land use is about where you build and what you build and how you build. And that's what it's about going forward. All of the literature that's being published today about anything in the future talks about that. Governance, that's our CRS system, that's our stormwater regulations. We've got to get that right, and as staff members and as a city, we've got to be doing that and be on the cutting edge for the documents that are out there and the information that's available. Obviously, infrastructure. In this city, we put a lot of emphasis on infrastructure, but I would argue that it's all 5 that make a city well prepared for flooding and sea level. And then last is the outreach portion, which has become very important as we've kind of socialized this around. One common theme we hear from the citizens over and over again is that the information is not getting out there. So we're trying really hard to find ways to get it out there to both educate our citizens. This is going to be new. This is going to be up and live on our website. These are the initiatives that the city staff is working on. These are either in progress, they're completed, or they're underway. This is going to be out there for all the citizens to see. These can be added to, detracted from, And then we're actually, in the future, actually going to do some data mining and data analysis on this as we go forward. Initiative examples, so I want to go through some of these initiatives. We're going to talk about infrastructure, our drainage improvement projects. One of the things that I have to give, again, the team of Tracy and Katie a lot of credit for, there's a infrastructure story map up where every infrastructure project on the city of over, I think it's 200,000, is now available for the citizens to see where it is, how much money is being spent on it. It's on a map. It moves all around the city, and you can watch it move all around the city. Governance, again, strengthening our stormwater regulations is a good example of initiative. Resources, Dutch dialogues, and I'll come back to those in just a minute. Land use, again, how we're going to use the remaining land that we have, and we hope to give you some answers, or at least a help to some answers with that, with another initiative that we'll be kicking off. And then obviously outreach, and our new web portal is the tool, one of the tools that we're going to use in addition to getting out. This talks a little bit more about the story map, and again, I can't tell you how interesting this is. If you want to go home, log on, take a look at this, just go through that. It will show you all of the work that's being done in the city, and it's actually quite a bit of work that's being done in the city. When you start to look at it on the map and you start to add up the dollars and cents, it's a lot of work, and again, it's all over the city. Again, the web portal, and the idea here is that a citizen only has one place to go to get all the information they need about flooding. And that was something that citizens wanted, and they wanted it desperately. And we're trying to put that all there. Everything that we can put there, we're trying to put there, and so our citizens can reach into that and find. It's, again, a ton of work being done. I want to spend just a minute here looking and planning forward, because the conversation, and I'm going to step out here a little bit and say the conversation that you all just had, I hope the work here precludes that from ever happening again, because that's the intent. So industry best practices, academia research will tell you that in order to decide what you're going to do, you've got to do your homework first. So we are going to put our hazards and vulnerability and risk assessment is really the tool that you start with. You have to know where your vulnerabilities are, and you have to know what your risk is. Decisions really need to be made on risk. And that's risk to your economy, risk to your critical infrastructures, risk to your insurability, risk to the economic vibrancy of the city based on risk. And we kick that project off hopefully early March, and hope to have a deliverable to you by the end of the year. Then what you do is you begin to put these other things against that, and you begin to buy down your risk. You have a choice. Do you want to buy down your risk, or do you want to spend your money in other places? But at the end of the day, what it comes down to is risk, money, how do you buy down your risk? That's based on the literature. That's the way the conversations are going to have to be going in the future. And I hope that we can provide that information to you so that you'll be able to use that in the future. That's the intent. That's why we have these projects up here. I do want to say that when you go out and ask for money, and I've been out asking for money, you need two things, or three things really. You need a project, you need the benefits of the project, you need the cost of the project, you need the consequences of not doing it. Those are the four things that you need. Without those four things, people are not interested in giving you their money. All of these things up here are designed to do that. Now the Dutch dialogues, it's probably a matter of semantics, but the Dutch dialogues actually deliver 4 projects. And those are projects that you could take to the market, that you could show to the market, that you could go and ask money for at the end of the day. The vulnerability and risk assessment, I talked to you about that. The hazard mitigation plan, right now FEMA and the state are telling counties that they want to see cities have hazard mitigation plans that are more specific to their city needs. That we have a FEMA grant for that we got last year that we'll be kicking off, so FEMA's paying 75% of that. The Army Corps of Engineers Peninsula Flood Study, again, that goes back to the risk and the gain. The reason that that is peninsula specific, because we asked for the Church Creek area to be studied as well, is because you have to have a certain economic cost benefit in order for the Army Corps to come in. They're going to study this for a year, they're going to evaluate it for 2 years, but at the end of the year, we're going to have some darn good projects that's already engineered, that have already been studied, that we can take to the market once that project is done. And that's going to look at protection from storm surge around the peninsula. And I think what we'll find is that a lot of our risk will end up on the peninsula just because of the threats, because of the economic activity, because of all the things that we currently have going through the peninsula. You talked about Septima Clark. If you lose Septima Clark, you've lost mobility in and out of the city. As a guy who was sitting in the back of an ambulance with a leg busted, trying to get to the hospital on a flooding day, and the driver wasn't sure he was going to be able to get there, that mattered to me that particular morning. That's the kind of things that we're actually facing right now in our city, and this vulnerability assessment will help to highlight that. And then the last thing is, once we finish all that, the stormwater program management team that we've talked about, they're actually the team that are going to come in, and in terms of the infrastructure projects, begin to put projects against what our risks are. And that will essentially be up to council to decide how you buy down your risk. But the industry is looking at this. I've just read a really good paper on it, and I was actually glad to hear your discussion, but I'm actually glad that I was up presenting this after it, because that's really the future for cities like ours that are living along the coast that are facing these threats of flooding from all sources and then sea level rise, which just makes all of it worse. And then finally, again, it's web enabled, and with that, I'll answer any questions. Sir.
Councilmember Griffin.
I was just thinking about this while I watched this. I have a question and kind of a comment. My first comment is kind of a rhetorical question too, but we just touched on the Dutch dialogues, and this is one of the, looking and planning forward, one of the big progress spotlights. But how much money did we spend on Weston and Sampson study of Church Creek? 600,000? And now this. What's going to happen if the Dutch come back and say that we need to go a different route than what Weston and Sampson said, as we've already started approving projects over there? That, to me, is going to be very, very scary. That's just something to think about, and part of what Councilman White said about doing so many studies. Eventually, when you do so many, you could probably start contradicting yourself. Are Weston and Sampson going to be a part of the discussion with the
Well, I get even better news for you. Weston and Sampson was at the table at the very beginning, and they've spent probably 6 hours with them already, going through their studies, the work that they're proposing, as they look to turn that into what might be a project that we could then take to the market.
So they're actually working together?
They absolutely have been working together.
Cool.
In fact, out at Church Creek, Weston Sampson did a tour with the mayor. I think you were there when they did the press conference out there.
I think it was the next day, yeah.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Councilmember Waring? Okay.
Well done.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just briefly. Mark, thank you. I mean, there's lots that goes into this, and there's a lot to do. It's the beginning of the beginning. I think when you talk about strategy, one of the things I would encourage you as you look to updating this again, what you're going to have to do, is you mentioned at the very end that this is something that affects cities. You use the plural.
Oh, yeah.
And it's true. And the only way to go to market, I think, and bring this to a level where you can get the funding to take this is sooner or later there has to be a document that this gets plugged into. I just wrote it down to something like the Coastal Atlantic Flooding and Sea Rise Strategy. I mean, it's got to plug into the entire coast. That's the only way you're going to get the political power and will to get infrastructure that works sort of along the whole coast. We're scalable because we're geographically pretty small, but we're, just like many other places, facing the same issues, and the way to get after this is collectively. So what's good for Charleston should be good for others and vice versa, and I think that's where you need to take this to the market. You need to take Charleston to the market and get the Coastal Atlantic Flooding Alliance going.
The mayor just did a really good job last week of doing this presentation to the South Carolina Council Floodwater Commission. Yes, sir.
I guess this calls for adoption. I'm trying to figure out what are we approving here? Is this official position, or is this of the city? How are we moving forward with this, and what is this like I know it's not an ordinance, but
Well, this is a comprehensive set of strategies. It's a major revision of what council passed in late 2015 that Mayor Riley submitted, but it's been more than gone over with a fine-tooth comb by a core of city staff members who really over the last 3 years have worked on this and added richly to it, if I may say. But it's similar in a way to the parking study that we passed at our last meeting. It's a guideline.
It's a guidance.
It's guidance.
Guidance.
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to be sure.
Yes, sir. Councilmember Jackson.
Mayor, thank you very much, Mr. Wilbert. I just wanted to say that, it's been a privilege to be on the Sustainability and Resiliency Committee as one of the council representatives. I think we have an amazing set of good circumstances, in a hard challenge that will never end in our lifetime. But I do think that we are so well positioned to take advantage of all of the expertise that's already here in Charleston with the NOAA and the DNR and the DHACs of the world. And one thing, I went to a conference, you were there, Mr. Wilbert, that was at the Riley Center last year, and one thing that I don't think about, and I don't know if the rest of you do, but when Beaufort County that supports the Marine Corps, they are basically ahead of us in ways because they have that tyranny of the urgent from the base that has made them want to prepare for these things a whole decade or so ago, right? I mean, even longer. And so I think that when you do multiply what we have in Charleston with our port and the reasons for our economy, to be well supported with strategies like this, I do think that we should be encouraged. We've got an amazing challenge to face, all of us, with the sacrifices that it's going to entail. But we've come just a long way in just a short time since whenever you were still in your part-time position, and we were listening to the King Tide Awareness team. When was that? A year and a half ago, 2 years ago at the most? And that feels like elementary school, and now we're sort of like, entering college. So I congratulate everyone who's put all the efforts that they have into this. I personally find it fascinating. I will volunteer for any task groups or anything like that. The money creation, I mean, we really just all need to work together because this is our challenge of the century. So thank you very much, Mayor.
Yes, ma'am. Councilmember Shade and then Wagner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mark, on an earlier screen, you had out there the citizen portal, so citizens can call in. And I'm looking on page 12 of the report, and we talk about new and ongoing action items with the GPS system that's in place. So, and this is something we discussed yesterday at our Public Works Committee. So when citizens have an issue, and it's just a maintenance issue or a cleanup issue, how will we be tracking that so that they call in and say, I live at 123 Maple Street and the ditch in the back of my yard needs to be clogged up. So can you just sort of give us a practical walk through how that's going to be addressed and how you would be tracking that improvement or addressing that particular problem?
I'm going to take a guess. I'm going to take a stab at it, educated guess, because I don't normally do stormwater ditch cleaning. But what I'm going to say is we're driving everyone to our call center, and our call center enters it into the Gov system that we've just purchased and just got online, and it's tracked through that system.
Okay. And I think that's just really an important part of that, because all too often we're just receiving that type of complaints from our constituents, and so those are questions I get.
Absolutely.
And them being able to get a response back to that, if we're tracking it, that's going to be an important integral part of this for our people that we serve.
To give counsel on our call center and in new ways that we've coming online this month and how to communicate with our call center, and maybe a little review of the kind of calls they've been getting, the responses we're giving, because it's been up and running about 9 months now, and they're really doing a terrific job. Councilmember Wagner.
Hi. All right, I've got something, I just need to clarify this for me and the normal citizen, okay? We talk sea level rise, okay? It's very clear that we're going to increase king tides, all of that. That's been out there for years, and we're seeing that. We're about half the days, as we are, we will flood, pretty much. Now, put this to where I can explain this to the general constituency. My God, it's going to be 10 feet higher. Does that mean if I'm at 10 feet above sea level, that I'm going to be at sea level? Or is that kind of like the tsunami effect, that right here it's going to be bad, but, you know, mile inland, everything's normal? I need a very simple explanation. That
I don't think we're going to see a 10-foot wall of water show up on the shore.
No.
And I think what's interesting is that, as we're finding out, it's different everywhere you go in the city. Depending on the day, depending on the wind, depending on the tide, depending on all those factors, it can be different in the same spot on different days. But specifically to answer your question, 2 feet of sea level rise does not necessarily mean that it'll be 2 foot higher in any given spot. The sea will rise 2 feet, depending on what the land is, will determine how far that sea goes up. Does that answer your question?
That's the answer I was looking for.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councilmember Ware. We have a motion to approve and a second, and I would just like to thank Mark and Katie. Is Katie here?
She's not. She's not, no.
She really has a tremendous amount of excellent work into this. It's been a truly collaborative effort. I think it's very comprehensive, and it is a living document, recommendations going forward. For example, when the initial sea level rise strategy was passed by this council in 2015, the estimate based on the science at that time was that in 50 years the sea level rise would be, our best guess, of 1.5 to 2.5 feet. Already, just in a 4-year period, we're upgrading our estimate that it will now be 2 to 3 feet. So 5 years from now, hopefully it won't go any higher, but it could. So this is the kind of strategies and comprehensive in nature that it's alive. We'll be coming back and following these things, revising it from time to time as need be.
As need
yes. And those the ayes have it. Thank you very much. Next, we're going to our council committee reports. First Committee on Recreation, Chairman Gregory. Thank you, Mark.
Mayor and Council, first I'd like to, Mayor and Council, first I'd like to recognize that this is Black History Month, and it's something that all Americans should be cognizant of. I didn't want to leave this place without acknowledging that. The Committee on Recreation met on February 7th at 1 o'clock, and we had several items on the agenda. However, we didn't complete the agenda, but there are some items that would require this body's action. The first item is the age requirement change to the Palmetto Artisan Ordinance. And we do have with us here our manager of minority and women businesses, Ms. Ruth Jordan, who will explain it to you.
Yes. As you know, as of August last year, we formulated a task force of 25 community members to include businesses, residents, members of the artisan program, staff, educators, and one of the recommendations was to increase the age to high school graduates or 18 years of age. one of the things that we want to do is to provide a robust artisan program, and we're going to come back and provide you with complete details. And so one of the first thing was age change for up to high school graduates and age 18. We're going to have a mentorship component along with a scholarship matching components, and so again, financial literacy. And so again, this will require an age change along with providing those kids between the ages of between 16 and 18 to be able to get their, I like to call it their business licenses, because they are currently not working with their permit here with the City of Charleston. And so we're going to create this robust mentoring program, and we're going to improve upon our existing biz camp so that our young people will begin to be begin an entrepreneurial program. And so we want to empower our youth up to age 18 or high school graduation.
Thank you. Any questions?
Yes, Mr. Lewis?
I have a question, just a comment. I want to thank the committee for the hard work that they are doing.
Yes.
They are empowering our young people. And there was a move just to get rid of them. These young people have done such a good job and put the city on the map for years. Every time I talk about the Rose Paddler, my mind comes to Miss Dorothy Williams. She was the editor of the Post and Courier 12 years ago. She called me and she said, Councilman Lewis, y'all got to do something for those young people, because they're about to run those young people up to King Street, because most of that time they used to hang on King Street. But her words to me, those kids are good kids. They're really good children, and we need to do something. I went to the mayor got Jimmy Bailey to start a program at the community center to help with these children, and years later there's been an uproar, but the kids ain't doing no good. Thank God you came in and y'all are working with them. I want to thank the commission for really working hard, and I'm looking forward to working with you and hope y'all continue to work to empower these young people so they could be young entrepreneurs one day. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Lewis.
I mean, I would also like to say I'm very excited because as you read the report that was developed, we're really taking this to a totally different level. We're really talking economic development and teaching our children skills of entrepreneurship, how to approach the convention bureau, hotels, et cetera, et cetera. So we're really talking, folks, about something that really, really expands and provides opportunity for our children. And I'd like to take my hat off to you.
Well, I cannot take the credit. I want to again applaud the entire 25-member task force staff, Mr. Jordan Lanier, along with all the other members, Janie, and all those who are here. They've really worked hard over the past 12 weeks, and we'll come back and give the entire council a full report, the same report that we provided in writing with all the recommendations.
Okay.
And so this was one of the first recommendations, was to increase, to allow our up to high school graduation or 18 to be able to get their business license to continue to do their tasks. But more importantly, we want to preserve and sustain the Gullah Geechee tradition of palmetto artisan, but we want to go beyond that. We want to create the next business leaders. We want to create the next entrepreneur. But we have to start now. We can't wait until they graduate. We need to start at middle school.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you. I want to continue going through the items before we vote on them, if that's okay. Because the next item that we discussed was the naming of the Reverend Alma Dungy Recreation Building. And we applaud the efforts of Ms. Dungy. And one thing that wasn't brought out when we was honoring her, she's also a great singer. You know, one day she gave me one of her CDs, and it was, like the kids say, off the chain, okay? Really good. The other items that was brought before us, most of them were discussion items. One, Brantley Park, which is a small acreage on James Island in District 6, effort led by Councilwoman Jackson. as a part of the Rethinking Folly Road, and the Recreation Committee supported it. The same for the Long Borough Exchange Agreement, and of course all this stuff has to go to real estate, and we made that clear. We did get a time for the Waring Senior Center and its opening. I think it's March 5th, 2:30. The other item that we had a lengthy discussion on was the Wellness and Aquatic Center complex, and that presentation was done by past Councilwoman Wilson, and we did have some recommendations there as well. While our staff was prepared to give us the status on all the other items, we decided to delay that because we were already at about 90 minutes in our discussion. All the items that I discussed, the Recreation Committee overwhelmingly support, and I make a motion that this body do the same.
All right, we have a motion on the floor, and that would include the first reading of the ordinance to change the, extend the age for the Palmetto Artisan regulation.
Yes, Mayor.
All right. Any discussion? Yes, sir. Councilman. I think it was 16 before.
16.
16.
It starts at 9, and so you'll see in the program that we're going to do virtual modules for the 9 to 12-year-olds, and then from the 12 to 14, and right about to 18 for training and literacy.
All right. Any other questions? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Now, I was remiss in not making an announcement earlier. I didn't write it down, so I just remembered. And most of our citizens have gone, but for the benefit of those remaining, and particularly for council, we have the honor as a city to have a new naval vessel being named after our city, the USS Charleston, and the commissioning of this vessel will be at Columbus Street Terminal on Saturday, March the 2nd. It's been a part of our budget for this year. We're going to host a breakfast that morning and all like that. I mention it because you must register online to be invited. It's no charge, but everyone who wants to attend needs to go online, and by the end of the day on Thursday, they're having a cutoff. So if you want to attend the commissioning of USS Charleston, please register online by Thursday. If any council members would like assistance, just call Michael Tito in my office. He's been serving on the committee. And
Pat asked me if I would work with them, and I've sent them the information as I did last year.
Okay. And so maybe it's been sent, but just bring it to your attention because there is that deadline. All right. So next is our Committee on Community Development. Councilmember Mitchell.
Yes. Okay, we had a special meeting of the CD Committee on City Council held Thursday, February 7th at 3 p.m. First, number one, we have a review of the Opportunity Zone proposal, which the item was deferred, but the CD Committee asked the planning staff to bring back to them the specific strategies that could be implemented as a result of the Opportunity Zone initiative. Planning staff provided a one-pager list of the proposed zoning initiative that could be used in the areas of Opportunity Zone. So that was, they're going to bring that back to the committee. Number two, a discussion of the Huger Street streetscape project. That item was not approved present as it was presented at the time at the committee. The mayor advised that he had written a letter requesting that the agreement was amended to allow funds for the project to be redirected to affordable housing. The request was denied by the South Carolina DOT and the Federal Highway Administration. The CD Committee voted to pursue an amendment to the agreement between the City of Charleston, the South Carolina DOT, and the Federal Highway Administration by contacting Congressman Clyburn's office, the Senator Lindsey Graham office for their support in amending the request. Councilman Waring made that motion. The mayor did not agree with this recommendation in light of the ongoing collaboration with the South Carolina DOT. So that would be before council tonight. Number 3, update to the request for the proposal for the Cooper River Bridge redevelopment area and the low-line affordable housing site. The Cooper River Bridge area, Ms. Johnson advised that 3 bids and 1 no bid was received. Staff is working with the selected most responsive bidder, which is Flatiron Partners and Classic Development Company. The appropriate documents would be presented to the real estate and the city council on a later date. In the low-line affordable housing site, 2 bids and 1 no bid received. The selected responsible bidder for the site was a Michael's Development Company. Staff is instituting the proper due diligence and follow-up. Number 4, we had a review and approval request for bond funds. The recommendation of the CD Committee of City Council was forwarded to you under a separate cover for your approval. The one amendment which was different from the staff recommended was $500,000 being deducted from the City of Charleston Cooper River Bridge redevelopment area and being awarded to Atlantic Housing for the rehabilitation of the Orleans Garden, which is 100 units. That change is reflected on the chart was sent by the clerk's office. Funds will be awarded to the development entities, which subject to all legal requirements being met by the applicants. So all these items was approved by the city committee, and you'll see the one that was referred to the council to be voted on. So I make a motion that we approve all this.
Second.
I have a motion on the floor to accept all that together and a second. Any discussion? Councilmember Waring, and then Jackson.
Are we voting on the streetscapes as part of this, or this is separate from this? Your motion excludes the streetscape.
Well, the streetscape you were voting on because they required the streetscape for us to ask the staff here to go. We want to contact the various congressmen to be able to see if they can redirect or try to help us to if they would make any change that way. Because right now they were saying no when the mayor went there. So if we vote on them, we instructed them to try to come up with something else.
If you would allow in your motion, can we set that aside separately and then vote on the balance and then come back and discuss that? Because I think there may be some sort of compromise on that piece to go forward. I'd like to discuss that separately. If we could, if not, I'll do it now.
If we separate it, well, I'll make a motion that we vote on all of the rest, and then we'll separate the one coming from that's dealing with the streetscape, who's the streetscape.
All right.
Doesn't matter.
Okay, so
we're going to, A is coming back to council at a later time regarding the opportunity zones. We took no action on that.
Right.
So really what we would be considering right now with this motion is all the requests for the Cooper River Bridge redevelopment area and for the other affordable housing bond funding.
Correct.
And Mr. Mayor, I think the Cooper River Bridge is information only, so we're not voting on that yet.
What's that?
We're not voting on the Cooper River Bridge
The Cooper River Bridge was information only right now because they have to come back, staff just have to do some things with that.
Get a contract that will come to the council.
Okay.
But Mr. Mayor, there were some information on the overlay zone to some instructions to staff. Maybe Mr. Lindsay can get up and get a little overview on that part.
About the opportunity?
Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor and members of council. In the Community Development Committee, the members of the committee did direct staff to go and investigate further the things that would need to be done to take maximum advantage of the opportunity zones to facilitate the construction of affordable housing in those areas. We're going to do that and report back to you next month.
Right. That was just information, I think. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of the things that we're going to vote on now is the distribution or potential distribution of all of the funds for the $20 million affordable housing bond that the community voted in favor of. And I just have a couple questions because we didn't sit in the committee, and I think some of this was done in executive session. One of the lines or one of the columns that's on the chart that was distributed to us about the distribution of these funds, which does total $20 million, is a scoring and a ranking system. And I'm sort of interested in to know what that scoring or ranking system is and how it was arrived at, and there's two systems. Apparently there's a 84-point system, sounds like a boxing match, must system. And then the last two were done by the financial analysis conducted by Bloomberg, which are the two city projects which we're partnering up on. I just am interested to know on that ranking system how that all worked. And then the second part of my question is, I'm sure a lot of these projects that are on our city projects are formulaic, and the entire program is conditioned on a fairly sizable sum coming from these bond monies. And if we don't give the full amount requested or only give half of it, some of those projects may not go forward, I guess. I don't know. So first off, how do we score them? And then what do we do with projects that don't get funded 100% what they asked for, if that is the difference between life or death of the project?
So I'll answer your last question first.
Okay.
We don't know the answer to that yet until we discuss it with the development entities. Prior to doing that, we bring it to you all to make the decision whether the amounts that the committee or the bond review committee allocated based on their review of the applications was appropriate. So typically once we bring it back to or have city committee of city council make a recommendation, we bring it to full council. Once you make a vote, then we determine and go back to those entities to say, this is what was approved. Will this allow your project to go forward and be feasible? When the underwriting review committee looked at it and made a determination as to the allocation, they also made other recommendations where some of the development entities could look at, for instance, their developer fee to determine where they could find other dollars to make those projects more feasible, if that makes sense. So that was the goal there.
So we're approving this, but then you're going to go back and talk to each individual entity, see where that fits into their program and their formula, and then is this going to come back to us reallocated?
Correct. It'll come back to the city committee of city council first, because the bond funds are what they are. They're $20 million, and if you look at what was requested, it was a little over $33 million.
So when we vote tonight, and each one of us individually votes, we're then giving you the authority to go back to each individual entity to talk with them and essentially negotiate a little bit with them to see where they are.
Correct.
We're not finalizing these funds. They're not locked into each one of these projects. Am I right about that?
That's correct.
That's correct. Okay.
Because, you know,
I think that's an important distinction. I mean, we're about to vote on $20 million here, and it's...
Well,
so one of those projects, for example, they might apply for these LIHTC tax credits.
Yes.
They may get turned down, and their deal may fall apart.
Correct.
In which case, we're certainly not going to fund them, right? So that's one example. And I do want to also raise the issue, which is consistent with what we're telling you right now, that we're going to come back for final approval, is that we've continued to discuss this whole arrangement with our bond attorneys, and there may be some legal requirements that the grantees may have to comply with, and so we'll also be part of the negotiation as to whether they're willing to give us, the kind of protection or legal requirement that we need. Am I saying that well, Susan?
Yes, correct.
Yeah. So before we finalize any dollars going to a specific project, we will come back to this council again. We're giving maybe a guideline, but the ability for us to now go and make a commitment to, for example, to 180 Place, that we're willing to put X dollars into your project. Go see if you can get the rest of your funding.
And just to follow up quickly, I mean, it goes both ways. If LIHTC goes away, that project dies, but again, they're going to need some funding for LIHTC to be there, right? I mean, they're not going to do 100% LIHTC funding, and the difference between what, 4% and 9%, all those different formulas that go in there. So I just want to make sure, I mean, this is a big deal. This is the first time we've ever had a $20 million bond issue for affordable housing.
That's right.
We're now to a point where we're actually thinking about projects that look like some of them actually may be ready to go. So we understand where those funds are going and what we're getting, what bang we're getting for the bucks that we're putting out there. And I think one of the things we talked about early on is these are all basically grants from the city, right? These aren't loans. We are going to take this funding, we're going to take this bond money, and it is going to go to affordable housing with no obligation back to the city. Whatever other obligations they might have.
No funding coming back to the city.
No fund, right. They've got an obligation to comply with all the requirements and everything they represented to us, the number of units, the pricing and all that. Got it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why it's going to come back. That's why we say it's subject to all legal requirements being met by the applicants.
Thank you. That answers my questions. Thank you very much.
And in most cases, and literally all of the applications that were submitted, they're also pursuing other funding, either 9% or 4% tax credits in order to make their deals come together. So this enables them to know what direction they're going in relative to their funding sources and where they may need to tap other funding sources.
I'm suspecting most of these are 4%, right? I mean, those 9% ones are tough to get.
One of them, one's 9%, I believe. I don't have that with me. I'll bring that back to you, but the majority of them are 4% or otherwise. As it relates to the application, we fashioned ours very similar to what the State Housing Finance and Development Authority fashioned theirs as, where we looked at basically what that development entailed. These organizations completed what is called a letter of intent or a pre-application, which was a 2-pager that basically gave us general information on what amount of fundings they wanted, as well as the number of units. And then once that was reviewed by the bond review committee, we determined whether we wanted a full application from the organizations. So within that application, it literally went into a bit more detail for the applicants to disclose for us basically what type of financing they were going after, how much of the bond funds were required for their project, 20%, 50% or more, what the affordability period would be, basically their readiness to proceed, organizational summary. It's a whole list of questions. What we determined as we went through the process was that the possible score was less than what we thought it would be when we structured the application, and legal basically advised us that we couldn't change the application once it was released. So we basically advised the applications what the possible point scores were and basically scored them based on that when they came into the office. So we used criteria that was previously established by agencies in the state.
The next we'll hear back from you will be basically what you've learned once these allocations and preliminary have been approved from the projects as to whether that helps, hurts, or is neutral.
Yes,
okay,
that's correct.
So we have to make a motion on that.
I think that's the motion we have on the floor.
Well, yeah, there is a motion, but I wanted some clarity. So are we only talking about voting on item D?
Basically.
That's what it looks like.
Yes.
It's just item D. Okay.
D as in dog. Councilmember Shade.
Just for a matter of clarification, so when one of these applicants came forward and they wanted 4.5 million and we awarded 3 million,
yes, sir.
Is that with the understanding that that project will still go forward? They didn't get 100% of their requested funding.
Right.
So they got a timeline to find that other revenue, I presume.
Correct.
To come up with that. So what happens in the instance and they go, we're short $1,000 or whatever amount of money they're short, that we will pull that money out?
Right, so if the project cannot go forward, they would advise us accordingly. And one of the things that we were asked by CD committee is to allow them 30 days to review that once we get back to them. And if it cannot work, they would advise us at that time. Either they can find other funds or their project will not go forward.
But we can't go back and take from another applicant to make up that shortfall. That's already locked in. That money's already locked in. Whatever we may have pledged to another applicant, we don't have the liberty of coming back and saying.
If they do not use the funds, we absolutely have the ability to go back out, re-advertise, and award those funds to another project.
Okay.
But the loose commitments you made total the 20 million, right?
Correct.
Right.
Oh, yeah, that.
So there's no room to spare, so to speak, unless somebody comes back and says we're a no-go, and then we could reallocate those funds. Right.
Good job. Thank you. You're welcome. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councilmember Mitchell?
I'm going to just make the motion. The motion's already made, so we just got to...
I think we have a motion on the floor on D. Any other questions? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Now back...
Yeah, while I'm here, I just want to recognize, I see Mr. Foster over there.
Yeah. Speaking of Mr. Community Development, right here, we're making great progress, I understand, with our, to go forward with our community center on Lee Street in the 1891 program? 1890 program. So, yeah. Thank you so much for being with us. Always good to see you. So next we have the matter of B, the discussion of the Hugie Streetscape project. Councilmember Waring.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The reason I brought that up, and we had a hearty discussion at Community Development, was in the agreement, the mitigation agreement, affordable housing was an allowed use. Streetscapes is an allowed use. I think drainages, we did a manhole prior to the Mayor Tecklenburg being elected. We did, I think, $400,000 or $500,000 for a manhole out of the original $3 million that was for mitigation. To spend 100% of the remaining dollars on streetscapes, which is not a crisis in the city, and I don't think anybody, in the city, leadership in the city anyway, would disagree that affordable housing is a crisis in this city. So when you get a chance to get an opportunity to get any appreciable dollars for affordable housing, we have to go for it. It's already allowed. Now, I don't know if the Secretary of Transportation is familiar that a good portion of the streetscapes on Hugie Street has been done by the private sector. When we voted on this in 2014, excuse me, there were no developments, new developments on Hugie Street. Today, they are. We also know from the drainage project that's going to be on King and Hugie Street, from King Street headed towards the crosstown, if you drive from King Street on Hugie, if you're headed towards Morrison Drive, as you get to where the interstate goes over, our engineering department has told us we may need to raise that street to effectuate the drainage solution there, which means the sidewalk is going to have to be torn up, the existing sidewalks. So it doesn't make any sense to pave new streetscapes there before we do the drainage between King on Hugie to where the interstate goes over. Now, after you go underneath the interstate, from that point all the way to Meeting Street on the north side has been done. It's in place by private sector. On the right side, there's a set of apartments going up and some additional new development. They will take care of that portion. So then you cross the intersection of Hugie and Meeting. The northeast corner is where Eddie Buck and their team is going to do a hotel and office building, parking deck, etc. That takes in a solid third of the portion from Meeting to Morrison Drive. So 2/3 at least of that project either we can't do because of the drainage or has been done by private sector. So I hear you, Mr. Mayor, on the portion about, well, there's some streetscapes that hadn't been done and probably won't be done. We can do that part. But I'm a firm believer that, has the Secretary seen the portion that's been done? Have we done pictures or DVDs showing her what has been done? And the part about, it's been said that we don't want to upset these people because they can take reprisals. I thought about that. That was part of our discussion. I thought about that, Mr. Mayor. And if we accept that, starting with me, shame on me. And I'll tell you why. I remember some years ago when Hurricane Floyd was coming, the lanes were not reversed. The governor was replaced, and so was the Secretary of Transportation. And you know what? Now we reverse them in advance, so to speak. It's never a problem. You know why? If we lead our city because of a reprisal, because we want to take monies that's allowed to go towards affordable housing because of a reprisal, then that becomes the new normal. That becomes the new normal on the way we do business with the Department of Transportation, South Carolina in particular, Department of Transportation. We have not reached out to our delegation on this. Streetscapes, and invite them, take a ride up and down Hughes Street, see what's happening. We were told when we voted on this, Steve Bedard came to that same microphone, and I asked Mr. Mayor, at that time, these dollars can be spent on affordable housing. Yes, but it's a use it or lose it, Councilman Waring. If we don't use it, they're subject to take the money back. That was in 2014. It's 2019. They're not going to take those dollars back. If we were to spend $2.2 million on streetscapes where we know development's coming, we didn't know that development was coming at the time. That wasn't in the pipeline. We now know what was in the pipeline is in place, and we know what's coming. We have an opportunity to take some of those dollars not only to create affordable housing, but to create permanent affordable housing. The project that they're doing on 180 Meeting, we funded some. We funded about half of their request. But going forward, I think these affordable housing projects in particular, when they create permanent affordable housing, I don't know how we score them in the future, but we should give them an extra point or two if they're doing housing that expires versus permanent affordable housing. So, the tug of war of the remaining amount being spent all on streetscapes, I think Senator Proxmire, I think was his name in the U.S. Senate, he used to give out this thing called the Golden Fleece Award, and it used to recognize wasteful spending on behalf of the federal government, like when the government would spend $900 on a hammer. This comes close to that. $2.2 million on Hughes Street? That already has sidewalks, by the way. There are already sidewalks on Hughes Street. So nobody has to walk in the mud like they have to do on Sam Rittenberg on certain parts on a rainy day. We actually literally, on a major thoroughway, have cow paths down Sam Rittenberg. Fighting to put people before streetscapes should be an easy task. So I would think that another presentation to the Secretary of Transportation, if that means we need to fan out, because it's a three-way agreement. I'd be happy to get in contact with Congressman Clyburn on the federal side. I'd be happy to reach out to Senator Scott and Senator Grimm. You have a strong relationship with Senator Scott. Affordable housing needs to be fought for in that light. So, and if they took reprisals against us, why would we be quiet about that? We should let, we're the largest city in the state of South Carolina. We should let every city know that's what they're doing to us. Whatever reprisals, they're doing that to us. Charleston County is a donor county. We send more money to Columbia than they send back. When we send $1 to Columbia, we don't get $1 back. So to sit here and be intimidated by potential reprisals, shame on us. I didn't say shame on you, I said shame on us, because our people deserve better. We can lead on this. I understand you don't have the 40 years experience. None of us would have the 40 years experience where Mayor Rowley could pick the phone up on something like that. But collectively, we do. The relationships we have collectively, we do. So, you know, I don't think this is poking anybody in the eye. I think if the reality of what's happening on Hughes Street were told to decision makers, people would win. So that's why we're not going to get any more mitigation money from the South Carolina Department of Transportation, the Federal Highway Transportation Authority, and obviously the City of Charleston on that Cooper River Bridge project. This is it. My point is, let's spend up more efficiency and include people. Thank you.
So if I may respond to just a couple of points and then make a suggestion in concert with you. But I do want to draw a distinction between what's allowable under the mitigation agreement from 2004 and what was agreed upon in 2014. Yes, affordable housing was allowable expense in the original mitigation agreement, but in fact, the former council and mayor in 2014 agreed in a three-party agreement that they would spend the balance of the funds for this streetscape improvement. I wasn't here then, and I agreed with you, Councilmember Waring, to ask if we could, make that change up. I did so, I think, very politely and very effectively, but just given the dynamics of everything that's going on and maybe the hassle of getting the feds to approve it as well, I got a no. In a way, I just want to draw this analogy. It's not unlike the situation that we were in, the county of Charleston was in with the extension of I-26. They had a three-part agreement between the county and the SIB board and the highway department. And so the SIB board basically said somewhere along the way, no, we don't want to do this anymore. We don't want to give you the money for this agreement that we had already agreed to back in 2006. Well, the county and the DOT said, hey, wait a minute, you can't unilaterally make a change to a three-party agreement. And so thankfully, everybody stood firm, and finally, with the help of Governor McMaster, we got the SIB board to come back around, and the agreement's back on track as it originally was, because two of the three parties that want to change it. And in a way, this is a pretty similar situation. I would like to change it. You would like to change it. I think most of our council members would like to change it. We're just one party to a three-party legal agreement that we've agreed to. I'm not a lawyer, but I think it would take concurrence of the three parties to mutually agree in order to make a change. That's what I asked for. I was not successful. I would like to also just point out that even though you're so correct, a lot of development has occurred on Huge Street, and those property owners, developers will do their little sections of the streetscape. You'll have a significant section that's not finished, and so you'll end up with not a pretty smile, with some nice teeth and some that aren't so nice, or some that are missing. So and streetscaping is not an inexpensive matter. It's expensive, and in addition, we've asked that drainage improvements be included with the streetscape. So I'm not going to say that it's a bad deal, but it's different. It's different. So this is what I would propose to you. How about I call Secretary Hall again, and I invite her on the next trip to Charleston that she has some time to meet with you and me on Huge Street, and we'll just go over this whole matter one more time with her and see if we can get a different result. How about that?
Yeah, I'm willing to do that.
Yeah.
I'm willing to meet with the delegation. I'm willing to meet with Congressman Clyburn. I'm willing to meet with Senator Scott,
yeah.
Senator Grimm. And the reason you brought up the example of the state infrastructure.
Remember now, we got a Charleston County legislative delegation. We
Thank
got
you.
State senators that need to be involved with this, because part of us is state matter.
Correct. And the delegation piece, as a matter of fact, was Councilman Lewis's idea at the committee. In other words, the State Infrastructure Bank Board said no. And you're right with your example of the 526.
Right.
The appointed people said no in majority, right? But it wasn't until the governor got involved, and all of a sudden the appointed people said yes.
That's right.
Okay? And that's the process that I'm asking for. As a matter of fact, it would have been great when the governor was here if we had took him down Hughes Street so he could have seen it for himself. I'm willing to do that, but my point is, okay, I just, to spend $2.2 or $2.3 million that potentially could go, or a healthy portion of that could go towards affordable housing. It's worth those efforts, and it's worth us getting involved collectively if that helps. I don't think it's a council person around this table that says they're not willing to make a call to members of the county delegation, senators, representatives, etc. So,
well, I do want to share with you. I want to be most respectful of Secretary Hall, and you know, they are one of the three parties to finish in I-526. That's real important for us. They are an important part of our drainage maintenance program, as Senator Sin has helped get started. One of those matters that came up last night, I mentioned it to you earlier today, of improving the drainage behind Ashley Plaza Mall involves tying in a new pipe to an existing DOT drainage feature. So, and time after time, and I know they say no sometimes to us on a crosswalk or some curb cut or something like that, but there are so many levels that we need and want their cooperation and good faith, and I just, and I know you want to be respectful to them as well, but I'm sensitive about that, and you know, if we have two of the three parties together, you know, I see bringing in the heavy hammer, but sometimes if we're one of three, I just want to be respectful of them. You hear me. Councilmember Gregory.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, just to sort of piggyback on Councilman Waring's effort here, if you go back to the bonding issue that we were just discussing earlier, and look at some of the recommendations from our Housing and Community Development Division, if you can leverage $2 million into 72 units, that's a blessing. So $2 million can go a long way. I mean, given the track record of our Director of Housing and Community Development and how she's been able to leverage our limited dollars into hundreds of units, I just think that this is also a good opportunity if we were able to have that 2 mil, or 2.3 mil, to leverage into additional housing.
I wish y'all hadn't voted on this in 2014.
All of us didn't. All of us didn't.
Okay. I didn't go back to check the vote. It passed. A majority of council passed. Councilmember Shade.
So, Mr. Mayor, if this mitigation money was allocated to us and we spent all the money we could and it came out that we had $2 million left over, I don't know, that maybe I'm looking at our legal department, what are our obligations under that? If we don't spend that money, we have to return it back to the state as it stands right now?
That's what Steve Bedard must have threatened you with back in 2014. Yeah.
So, I mean, so what harm does that create to the state? The state has allocated this money to us, they've earmarked it to us.
It's either state or federal, I'm not even sure.
Federal administration.
It's a pass-through.
It's a pass-through of federal funds.
The question is, what skins off their back if we've maxed out the money that we needed to do for the mitigation project? We have surplus money. What is their skin in the game at this point? They're not losing that money. We completed the project. We've done everything we were supposed to do under the mitigation. We got leftover money. Whatever that leftover money is, what's their fuss about that?
They've got a lot of time invested in it already, and
they get the money. They get the money back.
I'm going to let SCDOT speak for themselves. I shared with you a letter that they sent me, you know, where they basically said it's mandatory that we proceed with what we had agreed upon before. Maybe it's not mandatory. Maybe we would risk losing the money. I don't know. If y'all are willing to take that risk,
No, I'm just sort of more curious as to their position on this. And, I mean, we got a memorandum of understanding, we got a contract, we're bound by that. I understand that completely. And I'm not trying to rock the boat with them. I'm just more interested as it's pass-through money, it's available for a particular purpose, and they're raising a stink about it.
Well, what we agreed to was allowable purpose as well.
Yes. No, I'm talking about.
So was affordable housing, but so was doing streetscape in the area. And, you know, in the meantime, respectfully, council has, we're trying in any way we can to dedicate resources to affordable housing. We've dedicated some land sales. We have some future land sales. We now have a fee in lieu that's generated some millions of dollars already. We've dedicated, even though they're small, the fees from short-term rental registrations to affordable housing. I think this year, in addition to the $20 million bond, we've accumulated something like $6 million total of funding for affordable housing. So I do have to just reasonably say, if the DOT and the Federal Highway Administration don't want to change gears, you know, and fixing the rest of the Hugie Street and addressing some drainage issues there isn't a bad thing to do. I mean, you might, on your list of priorities, prefer spending that money somewhere else, but a former council agreed to it. I just question how much effort and skin you want to put in this game, because we're working to get other funding sources for affordable housing. We're doing that every day, and so I just being respectful of DOT and making progress and making something happen and getting on with life. I don't think it's a terrible thing at all to proceed with the project myself.
And just to follow up on that, Mr. Mayor, I think it's important that we are all good partners with our other agencies and governments, because we have a lot of projects. We will be working with them all, like you mentioned, with the Ashley Plaza Mall.
We need to buy some property from them to complete Cooper Street back to Meeting. Right. I mean, every day there's something else we need to their cooperation on. Councilmember Moody?
Yeah, I was just going to suggest, first of all, the Highway Department deals with highways, and the affordable housing piece is something that they feel like that's a bait and switch, maybe. So, and we're talking about $2 million here. That's, in the scheme of things, particularly the highway, it's not a big pot of money. But it seems to me like, and I rode the Hugie Street with Councilmember Waring, and I mean, they're down towards Morrison Drive, there's a lot of work to be done, and maybe that'll be developed someday. But it just seems to me like y'all ought to try. The issue of how far this $2 million would go to that, and it might be that we need to just leave it alone for the time being and not try to switch it. We got plenty of affordable housing projects that we can work on in the next year or so. But there will be one of those projects that comes along that we can maybe use some of this money for some kind of highway or something the DOT's interested in, and take the money that we may have otherwise going to put there and put it in affordable housing, or call some developer to, you know, to create more units or something like that. I think we're kind of all talking the same thing here. We don't have all the facts. I just don't believe, I'm afraid that the Highway Department sees this as housing and highways, and they don't, that's not their purview. So, so you got to
that might be part of it.
What?
That might be part of it. They're just focused.
I mean, that's just the way they look at stuff. And they're just saying, you know, yeah, unless you can convince them that that's affordable housing would really be good in that area, I think you're kind of beating your head against a wall with some of those folks. But for $2 million, I'm not sure that I want to upset 526 or upset some of these other things, because I don't want to go to war with Christie Hall and the Highway Department. I want to keep them there, but I think we can make this thing work. So I think you two guys ought to talk to Christie and see if you can make something, but I think that's what your problem is.
You know what, Mr. Mayor? why did they put it in writing that housing could be part of the solution? Okay, it was to mitigate people that was being displaced. Okay, we've got two what could be permanent affordable housing that's in the footprint that, hold on a second, I understand that's in the footprint of the area that was to be mitigated. We've got the property from the bridge site, parcel B, and we've got the 180 homeless shelter trying to do 70 or 72 units. So, and I understand council was very able in telling us about the agreement in 2014. But things change. Sidewalks have been repaired.
Put on that face when you go see Disney Hall.
That's what the SIB board said too. Things have changed.
That's the thing to do. I don't think both are.
I look forward to, bring this to close, I look forward to meeting with Secretary Hall.
Okay.
But not just going up and down Hughes Street. I like to take her over to 180.
We'll do both.
Meeting.
Yeah.
And parcel B so she could see what could be.
Make the case for why that affordable housing is so important. I mean, because she's just looking at it as streets and streets, and she's not getting any streets.
I agree with that part. I agree.
All right. Thank you. You're welcome. Well, we had a motion that was part of the committee report to go back to the council to ask for this change of use. I basically agreed with Councilmember Waring to contact Secretary Hall again and arrange a meeting and a discussion about it. So if that's acceptable to council, we'll move forward with that. All right. Yeah. Right. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Next is our Committee on Public Works and Utilities. Councilmember Waring.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We had a couple of streets and dedications that passed unanimous, as stated on your on our agenda, and I'll move the approval of items AI, A1, and A2. I'll move approval for those two things.
We're going to take those separately. Yes, A1 and 2, just acceptances and dedications. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it.
And for information, Mr. Newham told us that he has hired 2 project managers. If you remember, we appropriated money in the 19 budget, and they're now on board. So hopefully, some projects will begin to move forward. There was an update on 2 projects that Councilman Shaheed requested. No, it was more than 2, but anyway, like 10 projects, right? So y'all better get your request in before he eats up all of them.
And another one showed up this afternoon.
I know. But he's doing a good job over there trying to get some flooding taken care of. Oh, okay. Update from the floodplain manager on freeboarding, which I believe will come later on today. I'm going to go to the remainder and come back to you if you don't mind. The update on the stormwater draining revisions, we had a lot of discussions on that, and the committee actually took a vote to seek comment from the Developers Council at the Chamber. And, you know, I didn't make that clarification at the meeting yesterday. The Developers Council isn't staged with real estate people. It's actually staged with engineering development firms. You know, I thought maybe they need to change their name. It almost sounds like people that go out, buy property and build houses, right? But it's really the engineering arm of the chamber, members of the chamber. So they're going to review those recommendations that came to our committee, have comment, and then bring it back. And that's what the committee voted to do, and I will put that forth as a motion. That this is an update of the stormwater design standards manual revisions. Item 4. It's item 4 and 5, right, thank you. So that came forward from the committee, and I'm making that motion that we take that position at council.
I think the clarification is item 4 is the permanent standards that are being drafted under Kinsey Holton as the staff coordinator for that, and that's the group that has been working on the standards that are going to be adopted at the end of the year.
Councilman Jackson is correct. That was information that Mr. Kinsey gave. Item 4.
Number 4 was just information.
But we voted on number 5 to send the interim standards to the Developers Council.
And
Right.
somebody make the motion.
So I'll make a motion that item 5 be approved as approved, was approved in committee.
Okay, any discussion? Councilmember Jackson?
I would just like to make sure that as and essentially it's being deferred to go to the engineering members of the developer committee, and I think they're adding on, I just saw a couple of emails this evening that they're adding on other professionals that have anything to do with stormwater management programs in their relationship with the chamber. So while we're waiting for that to happen in the next couple of weeks, I just want to make sure that the document that they are considering and the one that we should all be keeping in front of us as an interim set of design standards for stormwater management programs is the document that came to us separately on Friday evening from Ms. Cook, and so that's the official final revised set of standards that were initially transferred from the Church Creek ordinance that the council passed last year, and in the process of getting to you on Friday, February 8th, and to the committee that's going to look at them on behalf of the Public Works Committee. That list of Church Creek standards was adjusted and revised based on input that Kinsey Holton and me, and I think some other people, were collecting from other members of the industry, the engineering industry. So the two items that were part of Church Creek's, or are still part of Church Creek's ordinance today, that seem to be the most not transferable to other parts of the city, have been removed from this document that's now the one that we're all going to be looking at, that was sent to us on February 8th. And then there is a new item that is determined, you know, by the people that are contributing to the ordinance as of tonight, item number 6. And that item was actually revised twice, inserted once and then revised. So the document that you should be looking at shows item number 6 with the line out of the original item that was substituted for 6, and now in underlined boldface type is the existing item number 6 that is going to be reviewed. So I'm sorry if that's confusing, but there were 3 or 4 versions of this document that came.
Can we just say the most recent version?
Now it's the most recent version,
Yeah.
but the item to focus on in the next couple of weeks is this item number 6. That's the one that, you know, is generating the most discussion, and I just want to make that clear.
So I have a question. So item number 5 is being referred to the chamber, is that right? The Developers Council, I have that.
Engineers
Chamber
of the
Development
chamber.
Council. So we're going to keep both? This one's being referred to the chamber.
No, when I say item number 6, I'm talking about in the standards document itself.
Not what's in here.
That's what's on, I'm looking at item 6 on the agenda.
He's not talking about number 6 on the agenda.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the next topic. What I'm talking about is the version of the interim stormwater standards that is attached to the council's packet that was delivered this past Wednesday is no longer the most recent interim stormwater standards that will be reviewed on behalf of the Public Works by the chamber.
Okay. It's understood we'll use the most recent.
Friday evening.
We'll use the most recent version.
Agreed, Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Wagner.
Yeah, it was sent out by separate memo by Vanessa.
Right.
It says section 2728, and clearly is marked as amended.
Right.
Right.
That is what we discussed.
That's right.
And pretty well said we weren't going to bring it here.
Right.
Right. But
as a body called Public Works.
Right.
I do think it's important.
people
I
are
think it's,
talking about it. This is the document they're talking about.
Mr. Mayor?
That's what I wanted to make clear.
Councilmember Waring.
Thank you. I think it's important that I share with the council, there were 4 engineering firms that sent representatives. As a matter of fact, one of them, I think, is on the task force, which was Seaman Whiteside.
Right.
Seaman Whiteside sent somebody, I think Thomas and Hutton, Forsberg Engineering, and I think HLA. All 4 separately came to the microphone and said that using stormwater designs from one drainage basin and making it applicable across the city was not one size fits all. None of them agreed to do that. Okay, so I mean they were clear in what they said on that. So I didn't. Well, you all need to know that.
All right. So could I make a request?
Motion. Yes, sir.
That we're going to send this for some review by the Developers Council.
Right.
Now, we have, as you mentioned, a task force that's reviewing the permanent, if you will, rather than interim design standards. It includes, in addition to engineering firms, some citizens at large and some other community groups that have an interest in this topic of flooding and all like that. And I know when it comes back, it will be a public process. So could we just add, in addition to the Developers Council, just make it clear that we would welcome any other input from either citizens or community groups?
I agree.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Terrific.
No problem.
Councilmember Griffin and Moody.
I also just wanted to add in that Mr. Holton specifically said that all of these things would be brought up with the manual committee for the new stormwater manual. So, you know, some of these things may be dismissed before it comes to us. And then I believe he also said that would come before the Public Works Committee as well, right? Didn't he say that before it came to council, the stormwater manual updates? It's going to come to Public Works before it comes.
I definitely believe we got a good public process inclusion going on. So.
That's right. Councilmember Moody?
I guess it must be just getting late. I hate it when the next time we bring this up, it's got to be on the first on the agenda, not last. I'm going to vote against all this. I don't want city council approving anything. I don't want any ordinances to go in place until we've got something that we can live with. And this it's not even half-baked. And for us to approve anything, I'm all for the committee, and I thought that's what we were doing was to put the committee back there. Well, some of us were out in the street saying, well, this is better than a moratorium and all this kind of stuff. I don't want people thinking that we're doing something that we're not doing. And that's where this is. That's why it's so confusing. We got stuff coming from every direction. So I think tonight I'm going to vote against all of this, and hopefully that we can bring it back in some kind of orderly process and put something in place that has some meaning. So that's my 2 cents.
Motion on the floor right now is to send interim standards to the Developers Council. That's
correct. That's the motion on the floor.
Yeah, but you're right. I'm going to get to that, but you're jumping ahead.
Okay.
Councilmember Jackson, and then let's call the question.
So this is on number 5. We're still talking number 5?
Correct.
I'm in perfect agreement with what happened yesterday at the Public Works Committee to send the the most recent interim stormwater standards ordinance to be reviewed.
Okay.
I was just trying to point out to the gentleman at this table that if you're going to go along with any of that review, that you use the most recent document that was delivered to us.
That's what we're going to do.
February 8th.
But that's what the mayor said.
Period, just put the number on it, say that's what we're talking about. So if somebody comes back something, we can say, this is number 2. But right now, that's number 1 that we're sending the ordinance to the.
That's great.
To the council.
Okay.
The current
Everybody clear on that?
I guess.
Any further discussion?
Nothing to vote on. No.
Can't be no clearer.
Nobody voted.
We're voting on B, little Roman numeral 5, to send it for review to the Chamber of Commerce Developers Council.
Correct.
The most recent version.
Thank you.
All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Councilmember Moody, did you want to vote against it?
I'm president.
Okay.
No, I don't have any problem with it going to the Developers Council. I'm president.
Okay.
So it was unanimous.
All right. All
It
right.
was unanimous.
Now, on item 6.
I'm calling it.
On
Item 6.
Item 6 on the report, I thought that was going to be withdrawn.
Yes.
So,
Yes, would you call on me, please, Chief?
Councilmember Jackson.
Thank you. Yes, I would like to make a motion to withdraw this ordinance. I'm sorry that I don't know how it got on the agenda. It was not.
I think it was the intent for it not to show up again. Here it is. We now have a motion to withdraw B, little Roman numeral 6. Councilmember Wagner?
No.
Okay. All in favor to withdraw 6, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes
That's
have
the
it.
extent of my report, Mr. Mayor.
I think we voted on everything, so we don't need to vote on anything. Next will be our committee.
Go back.
Oh, can we come back to that when we do first readings?
Fine, that's fine.
Because it's on as first reading.
Right.
Okay. Now, Committee on Ways and Means.
Second.
Thank you.
Adopting a report, Ways and Means, any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Bills for third reading, there was one that's deferred. We have 5 bills up for second reading. We're going to take all 1 through 5 together. Any discussion on any of those? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Now for third reading and ratification. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. So next.
It is third reading. They just did a motion for third reading.
Third reading and ratification.
Right.
Yes, ma'am. We did. And then we just have the one bill up. Folks, this is the last item on our agenda. We're making progress. We have one item up for first reading, regarding increasing the freeboard requirement from 1 foot to 2 feet, effective this coming August 1st, 2019. Mr. Jolka, would you like to make a presentation, or do we have a motion to accept? We have a motion and a second. I think we did have a long discussion about this and a very fine presentation by Mr. Jolka, and there were some questions that I think he was prepared to respond to from yesterday, but you might, since everybody wasn't here, give a very brief outline of the ordinance change.
Certainly. So I guess we can consider this perhaps the first proposed implementation of an initiative from the newly adopted update to the sea level rise strategy. So this has been several months in the works with meetings with staff, preservation groups, went to Planning Commission in December, the Stormwater Standards Task Force, which was recently mentioned last month. Very quickly, freeboard is just a measurement in feet above the base flood elevation that a community implements as a higher standard of safety for new development. The base flood elevation is established by FEMA on the flood insurance rate maps. So we are currently at a 1 foot freeboard. We are proposing to move to a 2 foot freeboard. You will hear me refer to DFE. That stands for design flood elevation. That simply means the combination of the base flood elevation shown on the flood insurance rate map with the added measurement of freeboard to that. We looked at a few similar cities on the Atlantic coast that also have significant historic districts to see what they've been doing. St. Augustine currently has a 1-foot freeboard, Annapolis has a 2-foot freeboard, and Norfolk, Virginia has a 3-foot freeboard currently on the books. Really the only issue that those cities have run into in terms of the implementation of an increased freeboard has been in Annapolis, where they still measured their height limits in feet as opposed to in stories in their historic district. So they are currently experiencing a crunch of a top limit that is not moving and a bottom requirement that is moving. In our historic district, we recently moved to measuring our height limits in stories. Off of the, outside of the historic district, we currently have a zoning ordinance exception on the books that allows for the difference between the base flood elevation and the existing grade of a property to be added on to the top of the height limit that is measured in feet. So we should not run into that same problem that Annapolis did. Briefly, the major benefits of a freeboard requirement is simply reducing damages to properties, reducing the number of flood insurance claims that get made to the NFIP, as well as the reduced costs to the community. We spend a lot of money, the state spends a lot of money on mitigation from flooding events, as well as consistency with neighbors. We are currently in the minority at the city in terms of our freeboard requirement. All of the jurisdictions surrounding us in the Tri-County area are already at 2 feet. So moving to 2 feet would bring us into consistency with neighboring jurisdictions and their requirements. This also adds a lot of points, actually gets us more than a quarter of our way to the next classification in the community rating system, which is this, the incentive program under the National Flood Insurance Program that allows communities to get credit for higher regulatory standards than what the NFIP currently requires. We are sitting currently at a classification of 6, which means a 20% flood insurance premium reduction for our citizens with NFIP insurance policies. We are aiming to achieve a classification of 5 when we have our visit later this year. That classification of 5 will bump us up to a 25% premium reduction for our citizens with NFIP policies. So the more points that we can get, the lower our class, the more the reduction in the premiums. And as you saw, this one move gets us 125 points towards that goal. So this is a big step in achieving that. In terms of how much of our city is in the special flood hazard area, over half. Over half of the acreage, over half of the parcels in the city are currently in the SFHA. So now I'll quickly draw your attention to the large packets in front of you that show some information about the special flood hazard areas in our city. The package on Berkeley County has the now currently effective flood insurance rate map panels for the areas of Berkeley County that are in the city of Charleston. For Charleston County, rather than printing off all 50 flood insurance rate map panels in duplicate for each of you, I instead did a broader look at the different areas of the city that you can compare between the currently effective flood insurance rate map that is currently the regulatory standard versus the proposed preliminary flood insurance rate map that we are waiting to hear from FEMA when the next steps in that effectiveness timeline will progress. We are hoping that the preliminary map will become effective later this year. But if you kind of hold the two packets side by side for Charleston County, what you're looking at there in the dark blue, that is the SFHA, that is the special flood hazard area. Those are our V zones and our A zones. So anything that's not that dark blue color is outside of the special flood hazard area. The freeboard requirement does not apply to those properties. Freeboard requirement applies to only the properties that are in the dark blue area on the Charleston County maps, and applies only to the areas on the Berkeley County maps that are shaded in the dark gray. That's the special flood hazard area on the Berkeley County maps. So it's a lot of information. Happy to come back to that at the end. One important thing to note in comparing for Charleston County the currently effective firm as opposed to the preliminary firm is that there are some significant portions of the city that are proposed to be removed from the special flood hazard area. And so those areas that are currently subject to SFHA regulatory requirements like the 1-foot freeboard, if they are removed from the SFHA on the new map, they are no longer subject to the freeboard requirement. Very briefly, we enacted our 1-foot freeboard on January 1st, 2015. Since that date, this is a breakdown of the number of permits that have been issued in the city of Charleston that would have to comply with that freeboard requirement. You see the top line there is the total permits that have been issued to the city. The number of permits below that have been issued in the special flood hazard area, those are the permits that would have to comply with that 1-foot freeboard requirement. And then the bottom line is the percentage of building permits that have been issued in the SFHA out of the total city permits issued. The important number is actually right at the bottom. That is roughly 5% of all the structures that now exist in the city of Charleston have been built to the 1-foot freeboard requirement. That is a number that we want to see go up. This is a look at the number of flood losses in the city of Charleston. We account for 6,600 flood insurance claims under the National Flood Insurance Program, and that is 18.7% of all properties that sit in our special flood hazard area have made at least one flood insurance claim since 1978.
Since 1978?
1978, since the NFIP went into effect in Charleston.
Do we have internal statistics on what percentage of that is on versus off the peninsula?
I do have those statistics. I have a visual if you'd like to look at it.
That'd be great. Thank you. You got it. It's late.
You may pass that around as you'd like. I printed that big because it's hard to see, but each dot represents an NFIP.
What's the tan area on this map?
So each orange, basically the orange is a claim. So that big blob there is the peninsula.
Yes, it is.
It's not a dot. It's just a big blob.
Right.
Got it.
The tan color on the SFHA maps, that is the 500-year floodplain. So that is what is referred to as the X shaded zone. That is outside of the special flood hazard area. That's essentially kind of an in-between zone between the special flood hazard area and a full X zone. But the tan area is also not in the SFHA. So back to this slide, the most important number on this slide is also at the bottom. The city of Charleston makes up roughly 2/3 of all of the NFIP claims made in the state of South Carolina. So just as we want that 5% number of properties that have been built to freeboard requirements to go up, that 2/3 number we want to go down. We want to make up less of a percentage of the state making flood insurance claims. So a quick look at construction costs. The Association of State Floodplain Managers did a very comprehensive national study in 2017 to look at what an additional foot of construction means for construction costs. And you can see in the tables, this also, I know this is not easy to read, but you do, on your desks, you have a printout of this PowerPoint, so it might be easier for you to look at in that way. Sorry, this here. You can see on the left-hand side, depending on the type of foundation that is used, there are different costs associated with building up an additional foot. Those range from $890 to $4,470. The middle table there shows approximately what the reduction in your flood insurance premium looks like as a result of each additional foot of freeboard. You can see, obviously, it goes down. People pay less in insurance when they are elevated higher. The third table on the right is kind of a breakdown of how those insurance premium savings over time offset the initial cost of an additional foot of elevation. You can see that it would depend on the the method used to achieve that freeboard requirement, but in a matter of just several years, usually that initial cost is offset by insurance premiums.
Can I ask just a couple questions on the left chart? So the left chart, did you just take into account a 2,000 square foot house? Is that what that was?
Yes. All of these charts are based on a 2,000 square foot house that is built to NFIP requirements.
I think it's interesting to point out that the most expensive way to do it is to do fill, and we're going to allow fill to reach the new freeboard requirement if we go to 2 feet. So essentially, you can come in and just bring a bunch of non-native fill, raise an entire development up 2 feet, and meet the freeboard requirement, and then flood out your neighbors. You could do that. That's possible.
Fill is a method that can be used to achieve the freeboard, yes. The freeboard requirement does not in any way alter any of our stormwater requirements.
So we're going to have to integrate our stormwater requirements.
Correct.
With the
Correct.
No, it would be effective August 1st, and we're hoping to have our stormwater manual changes done about the same time.
Oh, we heard last night, I think, I was in the meeting from Mr. Holton, that we'd have our manual done by the end of the year, I think is what he said.
Right.
Yeah. So, anyway,
Well, we're trying to get this done in time for the review for the insurance rating. Yeah.
Right. So there will likely be a period of time between the effectiveness of a freeboard requirement and the effectiveness of the new manual. But regardless of updates that are going to be made to the manual, the existing manual remains in effect until that update occurs. And so while fill is an option to meet the freeboard requirement, it is not the only option. And if it is not feasible to or possible to meet the stormwater requirements by using fill, the developer will have to use another method to achieve the freeboard.
But again, we're not just looking at new construction. I mean, if there's houses that are more than 50% in disrepair that we have to go and fix, they're also going to be subject to that requirement too. And for instance, on the peninsula, fill dirt's just not an option. You're just not doing that.
Right.
Right. Okay.
Right.
Right. But I mean, it's an option technically, but I don't think that you're going to go put a bunch of fill in the peninsula.
Why we let it be
All right. Councilmember Waring.
And I agree with Councilman Seeking. If fill dirt is not an option on the peninsula, why are we allowing it to be an option? With this, it would be an option if somebody wanted to bring dirt in.
So the use of fill is going to be regulated by the stormwater manual, not by the floodplain management regulations. Well, not by the flood hazard prevention section of the ordinance as much as the stormwater manual. So the implementation of an increased freeboard is not going to in any way amend the current requirements or the future requirements for the use of fill.
So you just had that as an example then?
Right, exactly. It is one method of building a foundation. It is not the only one, and it is typically the most expensive.
Councilmember Shade.
First, if we give approval to stop the first reading, is this refer to planning?
No, this is not a zoning ordinance amendment.
Second question is so then looking at the historic district requirements and the variance process. So is there a specific ordinance to govern the variance process?
That ordinance already exists. It is part of our building code, and that variance process is a framework that is established by FEMA, but then the local community adopts into our ordinance, and we enforce through our Board of Appeals under the building code.
Is that including what is defined as substantially improved?
Yes. 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 So a substantial improvement is based on the value of a structure, and if work being done to the structure equals or exceeds 50% of the appraised value of the structure, it is deemed a substantial improvement, and it must come into compliance with all current regulations for that community.
And not being itself. So my office is 89 Broad Street, it's right down here. It's on high ground, it never floods.
You're not even in the
So if it's worth $1 million, it has to have $500,000 or more. Then, so if I don't get a variance, it's going to completely change the power.
Well, plus you don't, do you know what your base flood elevation is? Well, so you might have to go even higher than 2 feet, because you may be well below the base flood elevation.
Right, so each individual project must be looked at individually based on the current elevation, the required elevation. In the example of 89 Broad Street, the variance process for historic structure certainly kicks in. I don't believe the city has ever denied a variance request to not elevate a structure that is deemed historic if they request that variance. That is a variance that is very thoughtfully considered. Well, the variance for a historic structure applies anywhere.
No, I'm saying off the peninsula, not in a historic district or not deemed historic. No variance. Have we ever given a variance to somebody?
Not that I'm aware of. The variance procedure to be exempt from the elevation requirements does require the demonstration of a hardship. So the variance process is one that is open to any citizen, any property. They may submit their case for a hardship, and that case will certainly be considered.
Councilmember Waring. Then Moody. Moody?
Let me ask a couple of questions. I mean, everybody seems to talk about if you have 50% damage. That's just not flood damage. You catch on fire and burn down, you got it. You have a tornado come through, you're part of this. So it's not just flooding that causes it. And I'm a little bit confused because I know you and I talked last night about the flood plain. They're lowering that standard, but it's not an exact correlation here between all this. But they're not. How does that work? They're not making less floodplain area, but they're lowering their standards or their baseline in some respect.
So the preliminary map for Charleston County, as well as the newly effective map for Berkeley County, there are some areas that were previously in the special flood hazard area that are being removed from the special flood hazard area.
Do these maps reflect that?
Yes. Yes. In other areas that are remaining in the special flood hazard area, some base flood elevations in those flood zones are being lowered. This is the result of a greater amount of research done by FEMA. Unfortunately, the new firms the data collection for those maps was done before the last several years of major events for us, and so they are using more accurate historical data, but the general trend of the maps is yes, that it appears as though flood risks are being reduced. That is not something that we want to, we don't want to encourage that viewpoint. But there are areas of the city that are being removed from the SFHA and areas of the city that are having their base flood elevations reduced.
Yeah, we just heard a while ago from Mark that we need to assess our risk, and I think that really is what it's all about, is how much risk are you willing to take? And I don't think people are really understanding that risk. And we may be imposing something on them here that if they do have a disaster, whether it be flood or something else, they got a lot bigger risk than they're anticipating. And it gets very confusing to me as to exactly how I measure my own risk. But anyway.
Jackson, Seekings, and Wagner.
Thank you, Councilmember Moody. I appreciate the discussion on that particular point because I know that the Public Works Committee members talked about it also extensively last night. And I'm no expert on the property and casualty insurance. That was one of my responsibilities in the jobs that I had, especially with the National Trust for Historic Preservation, where we had to, trust me, assess risk all the time. And basically, in today's insurance industry, regardless of what we would do about elevation and freeboarding, if an insurer is evaluating you returning your property after a disaster to a status that they want to continue to insure, they are going to make sure that it's going to be elevated. So the homeowner is not going to have a choice to say, I would rather, go through another 10 years of being at risk at a lower elevation. That insurance company is going to say, no, you're gonna raise it to the extent that you need to, or you're not going to get insurance. My husband and I just bought a vacant lot 5 years ago and built a raised house. We're literally 15 feet above the high tide at our base elevation, and we're 12 steps up off that, the ground. And we had to get flood insurance because our homeowner's insurance would not cover us if we didn't also have flood insurance. So that's how jealous the insurance industry is of their insurability of the properties that they're covering. So I do think that we should be caring about what's going to happen to constituents in a worst-case disaster, but just keeping our freeboarding at a lower rate is not going to protect them any more than raising it. Raising it will help them go through a flood in a better condition, and we're all going to be at risk if we have to replace properties after a major disaster.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't know if Mr. Lindsay, I might get him to weigh in just real quickly if he needs to. So a couple things. I want to keep this moving forward. This is going to take 3 readings, right?
Yes.
We can't just do it on first reading.
Yes.
So one of the things that these maps don't show, and you and I talked a little bit, Stephen, before council, it's harder to see, is what the current base flood elevation is for any particular part of the city. So the maps that we're seeing here just shows you the special hazard flood zones. It doesn't show you the base flood elevations. My understanding is, and I'll just use the peninsula example because that's what I represent where I live, but it's all based on NAVD 88, which is a line in space, mean sea level. And if the base flood elevation, for instance, is +7, which it might be in some areas, there's plenty of houses in this area that's in the special flood hazard areas that are 3 and 4. Mm-hmm. So if you're at 3 or 4 and we go to a freeboard +2 over means, 7 feet at base flood elevation, you may be elevating old historic houses 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 feet. And let me just get to my point. There's 2 things into consideration here. One is houses, homes, buildings that are hit by a natural or unnatural disaster. But there are also a number of properties all over the city, but in particular on the peninsula, that are not at 50% or better condition, that are going to be rehabbed sometime in the next 5, 10, 50, who knows how many years. There's also an entire portion of the peninsula that currently is undeveloped, that is going to get developed one of these days. That's the Ports Authority property. So there's a lot of considerations. I think for the historic district, we really have to think about what it means in actual height elevation and how our planning department and our preservation side of things is going to feel about raising some houses, for instance, on UG Street or Congress Street, or where there are houses that are, or I'm trying to think, what street to go? I went down Nassau Street. There's lots of houses that are going to have some work. So that's one question. I got one more. You got anything to say about that, or?
Well,
I know it's late.
I'm not an expert in that area, so with that caveat. But my staff did look at this issue extensively, specifically on the 2-foot freeboard matter. And our understanding is that historic downtown Charleston is more or less unaffected by this due to the historic exemptions that exist for historic buildings. So we don't believe that this 2-foot freeboard is something that is a major issue because historic properties are exempted. However, owners of historic properties are going to want to get their buildings up and out of harm's way anyway, and that's why the BAR has looked at this matter, and we're coming forward with our guidelines to help people do just exactly that. But the freeboard change doesn't really affect historic downtown, and my staff's look at the issue.
Fair enough. I just want to make sure we're semantically talking the same thing. It's not exempted. There's not an exemption. You have to actually seek a variance, which is two very separate things.
That's right.
Okay. Then you could be. I don't think that's really going to happen. But I mean, you know, with historic preservation, if someone realizes, wait, my base flood elevation is way down here, and now I got to go, it's not just plus 2 feet, it's plus 7, 8, or 9 feet. I promise you, the longest BAR meetings you'll ever sit through in your life will be at those, because people are going to come out of the woodwork to oppose it. Now, secondly, and I'm willing to give this first reading, but I want to see how this integrates. Fill soil to meet these requirements is crazy. I mean, it's all the things we've been talking about, and we're going to be talking about going off in the future. That's a real problem for me. And, you know, I know we want to save money, but we got to think about the long term there. You have to take the long view of things. If we're going to go start filling whole areas of the city with infill dirt to meet base flood elevations and freeboard elevations, I just think we really need to think about that going forward. I really do. So I'm willing to give it first reading, but we got to bring this. I want to see the base flood elevation maps of the peninsula too. Anyway, more than 2 cents worth late at night.
I'll just very quickly interject. I purposely did not print off what you have in your packets for Berkeley County. I could have printed that for Charleston County, but between the current and preliminary maps, you would have had about a ream of paper each on your desks. So I'm more than happy to send that to you and provide that information to you to get an idea of what the base flood elevations are in your respective areas. Happy to do that. I just didn't want to waste that much paper.
I got it. Not a criticism, just an observation. I mean, I think we need to know it. Someone comes and asks you, how does this affect me? You got to, like Peter and I, what's your base flood elevation?
Absolutely.
People don't know.
Are these available electronically?
Which one? The Charleston? The colorful ones are ones that our really awesome GIS folks produced for me. So I can send those to you personally. I can send any of it to you personally. The official Berkeley County ones that you see there, those are also officially available on the FEMA website as well. But I can send you anything you want.
Councilmember Wagner.
I won't ask you everything we talked about yesterday. I've just got a couple thoughts here. We brought up finance, how much it was going to cost. What's driving the cost of production in the world of Charleston right now is the dry drainage. If you talk to the developers, they don't like having to raise the street up. That's what's costing them all the money. Now we got an extra foot or two when we put the piping on top of it. Now we're going to give them 2 more feet over here. And my question is, what standard are we using? Because if you keep raising the streets up, you got to bring the rest of it up, not to meet the freeboard under that definition, but you're worrying about flooding. So where's that water from the additional height of the street and the piping going? I mean, okay, you're up here, you're creating a hole, then we're going up and say, okay, you got to be another foot over here. And that's, I think I mentioned that about a month or so ago in the first meeting. Now that's 2 different animals. That's an engineering decision, basically, to put that in their ordinance. But now, if you're going to create flooding, why would you build basically a mini dike? I mean, and then does this. Right now, most of the subdivisions are working as planned. Okay, the street floods, it tapers up, but it doesn't go in the property at the 11 foot or 12 foot, wherever you were built at. And now we're going to take it to 13. You know, the city would have never been built after the great rebuilt to what we have now after that earthquake we had a few years ago, like 120 years ago, under this standard. That's the first thought. Second thought is in following kind of Mr. Seeking's thought process here.
Hard to do.
Whichever one you want. I'm trying to at least, okay. But it's kind of late, but these maps, the flood maps, the FEMA flood maps, change about every 6 to 8 months, it seems like to me, or at least, but at minimum every year or two. Are we building that freeboard?
No, for example, the currently effective map for Charleston County became effective in 2004. So they are redrawn roughly every 10 to 12 years.
Okay. I just want to be real sure because they do change. Are we building to this standard or some unknown standard to the future? As far as where the flood map is and the flooding zones are and everything like that.
So the Berkeley County map became effective late last year. The Charleston County map, we are waiting to hear from FEMA to get the final version of that map. Once we get the final version of the Charleston County map from FEMA, we will bring it to council for local adoption. So we are hoping that that happens this year, but we think it'll be this year.
As our floodplain manager, do you find it somewhat ironic that in the era where we're talking about flooding and water, that actually the number of properties that are in that special flood district is going down, not up?
Yes.
Is that not ironic?
As I mentioned, that's not the message that we want to to put out to our residents. Now, I do want to make the important distinction that those maps do not definitively demonstrate flood risk. Right. Those maps are used by the insurance industry to provide insurance policies. But yes, there are areas that are being removed from the SFHA, areas where base flood elevation is going down. The freeboard requirement applies only to the areas that are in the regulatory floodplain, which is the SFHA. And we want to send the message that we are committed to protecting our residents, even if the mapping from FEMA doesn't necessarily support the same message.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When it comes to new construction, I think this is a no-brainer. We are focusing so much on flood insurance until we don't have any information. That's why this committee, Public Works, didn't come forward with a recommendation to the council. We are not focusing on property and casualty. Virtually every house that's in a low to moderate area, and actually beyond low to moderate area, every house that does not have replacement coverage will be underinsured with this. So if you've got a house that has a stated amount on it, in other words, $200,000, and you have $100,001 worth of damage, you've got to come up to now FEMA +2. And you're not going to have enough money in your policy should a large claim come about. You're right, Councilman Moody, if it's a fire, 51% of damage, our building inspection department's got to say, you got to come up to FEMA +2. You say, well, my policy paid me $101,000. I'm not going to have enough money to do that. What this will do is displace communities, in particular in the case of a large catastrophic loss. Again, we're preparing for flood, but the next time, let's say it's an earthquake. I brought this up yesterday. So it's an earthquake and thousands of houses get damaged. Everybody that doesn't have a replacement coverage, as a matter of fact, if you don't have earthquake coverage, you're not covered at all. Okay? So then you're talking about people going to savings or depending on the federal government with FEMA, SBA loans, etc. So now you go to get meager means, and you can't fix back to the level that you had. You're going to have to come up to FEMA +2. But there are more houses in Charleston that don't have the broad form of coverage, and we got a property and casualty guy to my right, councilman to my right. They're going to be underinsured, and this is why. Should we pass this in the current form, Maryville, Ashleyville, Ardmore, Westchester, they're going to have to come and get a variance to put back what they had. And, well, you're right, Councilman Whisper, that's never been given. So we're going to have, under a catastrophic loss type scenario, earthquake, Category 4, Category 5, direct hit, you're going to have tons of people that's going to be underinsured because they don't even know to try to get additional insurance when this passes. We need to have an expert from the Property and Casualty Department. I don't know whether it's somebody who teaches maybe property and casualty at one of the colleges and universities to say, okay, we understand, yeah, we may save a few dollars on the flood insurance. I get you on that. I agree with you on that. But the property and casualty part, take for example Linnavar. You take a 2,000 square foot house in Linnavar, it probably sells for, I don't know, $250. Well, okay, 300. It doesn't go 300. You can get it for less than 300. But let's go diagonally across the street to West Pawnee. Okay, that's going to sell for $400,000 or more. Okay, it's going to be easier for them to stay with under the 50% threshold than the people in Linnavar. And Linnavar is not a low to moderate community. So the moment, as a matter of fact, Councilman Lewis, your house, if you were to have a fire, or again, the hurricane took your roof off and knocked a few walls down, and you said, I want to put my house back just to where it is. Because you're on the peninsula, you may be able to get a variance. I think we need to look at this from a standpoint of property and casualty, in addition to flood insurance, before we make this decision. And I don't think we're doing that. We haven't gotten any information from the standpoint. In particular, people who do not have, I'd like to hear some professor or some expert in property and casualty industry that says, if you don't have the broad form of coverage on your house or your rental property or your commercial property, how's this going to affect you? Virtually everybody that's on the slab, once you get over 51% of value, you can't put back that slab. You're going to have to raise up to FEMA Plus 2, which is an enormous expense. So I think we all need to think of that. So yeah.
Yeah, what Councilman Waring is saying, I mean, there is this extended replacement cost that a lot of people have on their homeowners. The problem is when people are buying a house today, they call around and get insurance quotes and they're looking for the cheapest quote. Well, the cheapest quote isn't going to have the extended replacement cost on it. So there's a lot of people there that their insurance company's only going to pay what they have on their policy. Even if it costs more to rebuild, they're going to cut off at that amount. So that's what he's trying to say. Now there are extended replacement cost policies that you can get where if it costs more than that, you know, the policy will pay above that. But so many people opt to go, particularly when they're trying to get a mortgage and they're trying to buy as much house as they can, they're trying to keep that escrow down, they just will not purchase that additional coverage in a lot of cases.
According to our current situation, if your house is in the flood, what do you call it?
SFHA.
SFHA, Special Flood Hazard Area, and you have tornado damages more than 50% value of your structure. You're in the SFHA. Right now, if you call that being in a trap, that you don't have enough insurance, you're already in that trap because you got to build to FEMA Plus 1 right now, right? That's right. So what we're doing by going to 2 is you're not putting a lot of people in a trap. They're already in there now. You're just making it safer for them long term to protect themselves and their property from flood.
You're increasing the trap, Mr. Mayor. You're increasing the cost.
Yeah, you got to go up one more foot.
For somebody who may not have the money because they're underinsured.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking thousands of people in the city. that would be in that situation.
Okay, well, let me just make a couple of points, if I may. We're trying to address the long-term effect of flooding and sea level rise. We've just heard tonight that the science is solid that 50 years from now, you're going to have 2 to 3 foot sea level rise above what we already got right now. I don't know about y'all, but if I were to build a new house or to substantially renovate my existing house, I'd want to, you know, get a pretty substantial life out of it. So the whole point of this is to reduce the flood damage and claims that are occurring in our city. And long term, we're going to do that by building higher. We got sea level rising. We've seen flooding occur over the last 4 years. Long term, we're going to have less damage, less claims if we build higher. So that's what this is all about, in my view. Yeah, it saves us some money. Yes, it's consistent with what most other jurisdictions are doing around us, so the home builder doesn't have to plan one way to do it in the donut hole in Charleston County versus the city of Charleston, so we'll be on the same level, which is good. So, you know, I guess we could have actual aerial analysis by the insurance industry. We hadn't had a serious earthquake since 1886 or 87. I'm knocking on wood. We are near a little fall, I admit it, but we haven't seen massive, substantial renovations required because of earthquake in a long, long time. We have an excellent fire department. Thank you, Chief Courier, and all you guys. Luckily, we're not in California. Not that a fire can't get out of hand, but you know, it's a pretty spotty thing. If you look over the last decade, we haven't had whole blocks in major parts of the city burning. We just have a fire at a time. They do a great job. The real damage that's consistent in this community is from flooding. It's about the water. And that's what we're looking and facing long-term with continued severe weather and sea level rise. It makes sense to build higher as people build new structures in our city, and if they have the unfortunate consequence of needing to substantially renovate their property. And I understand there will be some cases where those folks might be underinsured. But if I'm going to spend half the value of my property to put it back into service, and I happen to live in a special flood hazard area, don't I want to raise it to where I'll be safe for the future? And the difference in raising it 1 foot versus 2 foot, if you got to elevate your home, I mean, you got 1 more foot of block or wood or whatever you're going to use to hold your house up, I guess, once you jack it up. But you know, if you're in the process of elevating your house, it's not going to make it that much more expensive to do it in a safe fashion.
Mr. Mayor, that's a campaign speech. That's a campaign speech. It is about, I'm going to tell you that thing about raising it a foot or so. You are incorrect on that. Councilman Seeking just pointed that out. You are incorrect that you just have to go up 1 more foot. That's depending on your base flood level. So if you're at 6 and you have to go to 15, that's 9 feet. It depends on where the house is and what their base level is. It is not 1 additional foot.
All right, and I would just argue that if you're in a special flood hazard area, to be safe long term, you would want to be.
If you have the money. If you have the money to do it. You make an assumption everybody's going to have the money to raise their houses. There are a ton of people in this town that don't.
Councilmember Jackson and Chair.
And I hear your argument, Councilman Waring.
That's a fact.
I understand your position. But if your house is damaged 50% or more, you're going to have to raise it anyhow. That's the problem. You're going to have to raise it anyhow.
Unless you can get a variance.
Unless you get a variance. But if you can't get a variance, you're going to have to raise it. The question is, we're at a standard right now of +1. Right. So the example that he gave, they're putting in what your flood zone is, what your baseline is right now, you're still going to be at that point +1, as it stands right now.
I agree.
So if we do nothing at all, and something happens to this city, if it's an earthquake, it's a tornado, it's a major flood, and your house is damaged, and your property is damaged by 50% or more, you're going to have to raise it to some standard. You're going to have to raise it to some standard.
We know that.
I understand. So the question then becomes, is that standard, as we leave it right now, plus 1 more foot? That's the difference that we're talking about.
Our city is geared towards giving variances to people on the peninsula. It is not geared towards giving variances to people off of the peninsula.
I agree with you.
Something has to be done to effectuate that. Right now, that's not in place with this what we're looking at right now.
And that's my concern about that. I'm with you on that.
Well, I'm sorry I interrupted you. If you were getting to that point, then that's
that's okay. You can interrupt me. But I think we're, and this is what is getting us a little off a little bit. No matter where we are, we have a standard right now. We're at a standard right now. And to rebuild or to renovate that property, we're going to have to go to that standard. It's going to cost us, whether or not you're insured properly or underinsured, it's going to be a problem for us. And you're right about the folks west of the Ashley, getting a variance is going to be much more difficult. But there's a standard we have to raise anyhow. So we're talking about increasing the standard by 1 more foot. That's the problem with this whole thing.
Yeah, I agree. I hope it's not piling on. But I think what we need to be aware of is the elevation that a house is situated at doesn't have anything to do with us. That's out of our control. So really, all we're talking about tonight is potentially increasing the replacement cost of a property owner and using the 2,000 square foot footprint. On Mr. Jelka's chart, it was $890 to raise a house another foot. That's the only thing we're deciding here. We've already raised it 1 foot. We can't control the elevation that the house is mapped at by the FEMA program. All we're talking about tonight is making new houses 1 foot higher, and any house that's replaced 1 foot higher than it would have to be if it happened tonight. If a house had to be replaced tonight, they would be doing elevation plus 1 foot. And all we're talking about is adding 1 more foot.
That's if they're at FEMA +1. You're assuming they're already at FEMA +1.
They are, in our city. They're at FEMA, no, sir. I'm talking about no matter what, no, I'm saying no matter what would happen to them tonight, they're obligated to raise their house to the FEMA zone, base elevation. That's out of our control. So all that's in our control is the freeboarding, and what we're talking about tonight is 1 more foot of freeboarding.
Can I come to you just 1 minute?
Can I just say something really briefly? I mean, Stephen, thank you, by the way. I mean, one of the things that's been impressive is how prepared you are tonight. You really know what you're talking about, so that gives us a lot of confidence. And you haven't been in that job for very long, so there's a lot to know, and there's a lot to think about. So I'm sitting here thinking about this. This is not a zoning ordinance. This is a different ordinance, not a zoning ordinance. We have already learned from the Supreme Court of South Carolina, we can treat people differently through zoning ordinances. This isn't a zoning ordinance, so the lawyer in me starts thinking about equal protection and all that kind of stuff. I think that we need to look at, and there's lots of neighborhoods that are historic neighborhoods that aren't in the historic district, but have a lot of history in them, and a lot of it has to do with their architecture. What they look at, we need to look at, Mr. Mayor, giving people who aren't on the peninsula in the old historic district the ability to get a variance. I mean, we have to do that. I mean, in new development, I'm with you. New development, get up to 2 feet, have at it. Don't do it with fill. We got to figure that out. Got to figure that out. But, you know, and I was thinking about West Pawnee and that area where it's really sort of a cool neighborhood because it's uniform and everything looks the same, and you know, that just makes it really charming. So I think we have to think about the equal protection factor in this and making sure everyone's treated equally, you know, because natural disasters don't hit everybody equally, but these requirements don't either, and that's a little bit of an issue for me.
So sorry. I was just going to respond really quickly to that point, that just last night at the Board of Appeals under the Building Code meeting, we had a request for an elevation variance for a home in Burns Downs. partially because of the shutdown, there's been kind of a paperwork shuffle because in order to grant that historic variance, we need paperwork from the federal government. But the consideration is already being given to properties off the peninsula.
We just need to build that into this. We've got to.
Did they get the variance?
I believe it was, I obviously was here last night, but I believe it was deferred from last night because they didn't have all the paperwork.
Councilmember White.
So I'm assuming that there's probably a reason that we can't make this ordinance, or, well, I guess effectively an ordinance, applicable to new construction only.
There are two reasons. The first reason is that the long-term goal is to protect as many citizens as we can from increasing flood hazards.
But that's internal. That's not a law. It's not a federal mandate. That's not FEMA. That's us saying this is the reason why.
It is not a requirement. It is a recommendation from FEMA.
Okay, not a requirement, recommendation. Got
yes. Secondly, coming back to the CRS rating, this one item gets us more points than anything else that's possible at the moment in terms of achieving a higher CRS rating.
Okay, so I want to address that. Your two responses in two ways. Number one, response to the requirement or the guidelines or the recommendation by FEMA. We just talked about giving variances. If all of a sudden everybody gets a variance for the sake of not doing it when they replace, we haven't made any impact to existing structures, only new construction. So that's sort of number one. But the second thing is that the decrease in costs, and I've just asked Councilman Shealy this, as he's obviously in the business of insurance, we might benefit from a reduction in cost for flood insurance. But every insurance company who identifies that we're now FEMA +2, they're going to immediately, upon renewal, they're going to know that, and they're going to immediately assess each and every person's home with additional costs for the expectation of the replacement being higher than what it is today. So their premium's going up on that side, for sure. So whether or not we actually get a net cost savings, I would say, I'm not an expert enough to know, but I know that there's going to be a variance. Every year my insurance policy renews. Every year my insurance company says, oh, we think you need X dollars more because the value of your house has gone up and the cost and blah, blah, blah. This is going to come up for sure, guaranteed. So if there's not a reason why we can't make it for new construction only, it seems to me that we probably should consider it, because everything we've talked about from this point forward tonight, and actually when we talked about it the first time, is all about replacement, not new construction. I don't think anybody argues about the new construction component. You can factor it into the purchase price. You understand what the cost is, you know, going in. It's the replacement piece that everybody's got heartburn about.
Or substantial renovation.
Right. Right. So anyway, that's my thoughts.
Sure. Just a couple more numbers that I'll add to kind of help paint the picture of how often we see a substantial damage or a substantial improvement. Since the beginning of 2015, so including all of the major flooding events that we have seen in the last 4 years, as well as fires and any other source of damage, there have been a total of 12 substantial damage determinations made in the city of Charleston in the last 4 years. In the entire Charleston County in the last 4 years, there have been a total of 50. It doesn't happen as often as people may think. It's harder to hit that 50% than people think.
What was that number 27 years ago?
Did not exist then. The substantial damage was not defined by FEMA, and there was no substantial damage requirement at the time of Hugo, so we don't have those numbers.
Let's call the question. All in favor of increasing our freeboard to 2 feet, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? You want to have a roll call? Or the nays? Okay.
And under our rules, I'm going to vote yes, but I'd like to explain that I would like you to come back before second reading and give us some answers to the new versus old construction in the soil. I mean, I think those are two things before we put this in place I want to know about. I voted yes. With that explanation.
All right. Any further business come before this council tonight? Yes, sir. Councilmember Waring.
I do have something, and it's going to be quick, but Mrs. Weiss came to the microphone and talked about sister cities, and it all sounded so good, but I think we inadvertently defunded her program through the community assistance program. And we funded it last year, and then we came back this year to zero. So I want to throw it out, hopefully, not tonight, but we can hopefully work out some funding for Ms. Weiss's and her program, because the Sister City program certainly seemed to be something that's beneficial to Charleston. We are an international city, and certainly that dovetail together. So I would hope that we can get together and get
okay. We're adding a lot of sister cities, I know that. All right, we'll bring that up at our next meeting. We stand adjourned. Thank you.